My wife dumped me on my birthday with, "We'll always be friends though." I replied, "Absolutely." Weeks later, she found out friendship didn't include rent money, emotional support, or car repairs, especially once I started dating her neighbor. So picture this. There I was, 32 years old, standing in my own living room with a grocery store sheet cake flickering like a small fire hazard in front of me, and I'm thinking to myself, this is it. This is the moment Harper finally surprises me with something good. Maybe a watch, you know? One of those classy ones that makes you look like you've got your life together even when you're just checking how late you are to everything. Or maybe she'd booked us a trip somewhere tropical where the biggest decision I'd have to make was whether to get the fish tacos or the shrimp tacos. I'm a simple man with simple dreams, and honestly, after 5 years of marriage where my birthday gifts had ranged from socks to a Costco-sized bottle of multivitamins, I figured the universe owed me something decent. The pizza boxes were stacked on the counter like the Leaning Tower of pepperoni, and I'd already eaten 3 slices because nobody else was showing up to this party. Harper had said she wanted it to be intimate this year, which I thought meant romantic. Turns out it meant she didn't want witnesses to what was about to go down. She was standing there in her favorite athleisure outfit, the one she wore when she was being serious about yoga, but really just wanted to look cute while drinking overpriced smoothies, and she had this look on her face. You know the look, the one that says, "I've been rehearsing something in the shower for 3 weeks, and I'm about to unleash it on you with the confidence of a person who just finished a self-help audiobook." I should have known something was up when she cleared her throat and clasped her hands together like she was about to deliver a keynote speech at a conference for people who peaked in college. "Logan," she said, and the way she said my name made my stomach drop faster than my credit score after we bought that stupid farmhouse table she insisted we needed. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I've come to realize that we've grown apart. We're not the same people we were when we got married, and I think it's time we acknowledge that our journey together has reached its natural conclusion. I blinked. Once. Twice. Waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. She kept going, and I swear to God, she hit every single breakup cliché like she was going down a checklist. "It's not you, it's me." Check. "I need to find myself." Check. "You deserve someone who can give you what you need." Check, check, and check. She even threw in something about embracing my authentic self and honoring my truth, which made me want to ask her what self-help guru she'd been binge-watching on YouTube at 2 in the morning, but I kept my mouth shut because honestly, I was too stunned to form words. The candles on my birthday cake were melting into the frosting by this point, little rivers of wax creating abstract art that somehow felt like a metaphor for my marriage. She wrapped up her TED Talk with the classic closer, delivered with the kind of earnest eye contact that people use when they're trying to convince you they're doing you a favor. "But Logan, we'll always be friends though." Friends. Friends. The woman who'd promised to be my partner through sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part, was now offering me the same social contract I had with the guy who delivered my Amazon packages. I felt my brain short-circuit for a second, like when you accidentally bite into tinfoil, but then something clicked. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the 3 beers I'd already knocked back thinking this was going to be a celebration. Maybe it was divine intervention. But in that moment, standing there with wax-covered cake and cold pizza, I felt this weird sense of calm wash over me, and I smiled. I smiled so wide my face hurt. "Absolutely," I said, nodding like I'd just been offered a promotion instead of a divorce. "Friends. Yeah, that sounds great, Harper. Really great." She looked relieved, like she'd been expecting me to lose my mind or beg her to reconsider or do something dramatic that would require her to call her mom and spend 3 hours dissecting my toxic behavior. Instead, I was standing there grinning like a dude who just found out his student loans got forgiven. She stepped forward and hugged me. Actually hugged me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders and squeezing like we'd just made some beautiful, mature decision together. "Oh, Logan," she sighed into my shoulder. "I'm so glad you're handling this so maturely. This is why I know we can make this friendship work." What Harper didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known while she was standing there feeling all proud of herself for communicating her needs, or whatever garbage her therapist had told her, was that my brain was already 3 steps ahead. See, while she was hugging me and probably mentally planning how she'd spin this story to make herself look like the reasonable one, I was doing math. Friendship math. The kind of math that involves adding up all the things a husband does versus all the things a friend does, and realizing there's a massive gap in that Venn diagram. Friends don't wake up at 6 in the morning to make you a latte with that specific almond milk from Whole Foods that costs more per ounce than liquid gold. Friends don't jump your car battery every other week because you refuse to admit your vehicle is dying and keep saying, "It's just the cold weather," even though it's July. Friends definitely don't spend their Saturdays unclogging your bathroom sink because you insist on washing your hair in there even though I've told you 1,000 times that the drain can't handle that much conditioner, Harper. Friends don't do that. But she didn't know any of this yet. She was still riding the high of her brave decision to end things, still feeling like the protagonist in her own inspirational movie about a woman who finally chose herself. She pulled back from the hug and looked at me with actual gratitude in her eyes, like I'd just given her a gift instead of watching my marriage implode on my birthday. "Thank you for understanding," she said softly. "I was so worried you'd make this difficult." "Nope," I said, still smiling that slightly manic smile. "Not difficult at all. We're friends now. Friends are easy." She smiled back, and I watched her walk to the bedroom, probably to call her best friend Jenna and tell her how amazingly I'd taken the news, how evolved I was being about the whole thing. Meanwhile, I stood there next to my birthday cake, watching the last candle sputter out, and I started mentally drafting what I liked to call the friendship invoice. Every single friend benefit she thought she'd keep, every assumption she'd made about how this new arrangement would work. I was about to introduce her to a concept she'd somehow missed in all her self-discovery. Actions have consequences, and friendship is a two-way street, baby. I cut myself a piece of cake, poured another beer, and toasted to absolutely nothing. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to my empty living room. "And happy Friendship Day to you, Harper." This was going to be fun. The next morning arrived with all the grace of a freight train crashing through a library, and I woke up feeling weirdly energized for someone whose marriage had just gone up in smoke less than 12 hours ago. I could hear Harper moving around in the kitchen, and based on the sounds, cabinet doors opening and closing with increasing frustration, the clink of her favorite mug being set down a little too hard, I could tell she was expecting her usual morning routine. You know, the one where I played the role of personal barista, short-order cook, mechanic, and emotional support human all before 8 in the morning. I laid there in bed for a minute, staring at the ceiling and listening to her huff and sigh like someone had personally wronged her by not having breakfast ready. Any other day, any other week, any other year of our marriage, I would have dragged myself out of bed, shuffled to the kitchen in my pajamas, and started the whole song and dance. Fire up the espresso machine that cost more than my first car, steam the almond milk to exactly 140 degrees because anything hotter ruins the flavor profile, toast her gluten-free bread that tastes like cardboard dipped in sadness, and have everything ready by the time she finished her morning skincare routine that involved more steps than a NASA launch sequence. But here's the thing about being demoted from husband to friend. Friends don't do that. Friends don't anticipate your every need and cater to your every whim like you're some sort of benevolent dictator. Friends are equals. Friends split checks at restaurants and take turns driving and definitely, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, do not make you custom lattes at the crack of dawn. So I got up, got dressed, and walked right past her in the kitchen. She was standing there in her silk pajamas, the expensive ones she bought during her "I deserve to treat myself" phase that lasted approximately 8 months and drained our savings account. And she looked at me with this expectant expression, like a golden retriever waiting for someone to throw the ball. "Morning," she said, sweet as artificial sweetener, eyeing the coffee machine meaningfully. "Morning, friend," I replied, grabbing my keys and phone. I'd already made myself a coffee. Black, simple, the way God intended, in a travel mug, and I was heading out the door. But not before leaving her a little present on the counter. A note, written on the back of one of her countless vision board printouts that she'd scattered around the house, like some kind of manifestation confetti. The note read, "Happy Friendship Day? Thought you might want to know the toaster has a timer function. Works great as an alarm clock if you need to remember to make your own breakfast. Also, friends typically don't make each other coffee, but there's a great tutorial on YouTube if you need help with the espresso machine. Have a blessed day." I heard her pick up the note just as I was closing the front door, and the sound she made, somewhere between a gasp and a confused squeak, fueled me all the way to my truck. I had to stop myself from doing a little victory dance in the driveway, because I'm pretty sure the neighbors were already getting enough entertainment from our imploding marriage without me adding choreography to it. Work that day was fantastic, mainly because I spent most of it daydreaming about my new life as Harper's friend and what that was going to look like. No more splitting the mortgage on a house, she insisted we buy, even though it was 30 minutes outside my work radius. No more utilities in my name, while she ran the heater like we were trying to recreate the surface temperature of the sun. No more being the default handyman for every single thing that broke, malfunctioned, or made a weird noise. I felt lighter than I had in years, like someone had been making me wear a weighted vest, and I'd finally gotten permission to take it off. By the time I got home that evening, I'd already made my decision. I was moving out. That weekend, I'd already texted my buddy Marcus, who had that friend with the apartment complex, and boom, I had a place lined up. Small, affordable mine. The holy trinity of post-breakup living. Harper was in the living room when I walked in, and she'd clearly spent her day spiraling because she had that manic energy that women get when they've been stress cleaning and overthinking simultaneously. "We need to talk," she said, which is universally recognized as the 4 worst words in the English language. "Sure, friend," I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door, a bowl she'd made in a pottery class she attended twice before deciding it wasn't her passion. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about logistics," she started, and I could tell she'd prepared talking points. Probably bullet points. Possibly a PowerPoint presentation if I gave her enough time. "And I think the best thing is for us to continue living here together until we figure things out. It doesn't make sense financially for either of us to move out right now, and we're adults. We can handle this maturely." I nodded along like I was actually considering this absolutely insane proposal. "That's a really interesting perspective, Harper. But here's the thing. I've already found a new place, and I'm moving out this weekend." Her face did this thing where it kind of froze, like her brain was buffering. "You what? You can't just move out on me." "As your friend," I said, and I'm not gonna lie, I was really starting to enjoy that phrase. I totally can. Friends don't share mortgages, Harper. Friends don't co-sign leases. Friends don't legally bind themselves to 3 decades of debt on a house that has character, but really just means the plumbing is from 1987 and the foundation is questionable. But what about the bills? What about the rent? What about? She was spiraling now, her voice getting higher with each question, and I could see the exact moment reality started setting in. The reality that this house, with its farmhouse aesthetic and Instagram-worthy kitchen that she never actually cooked in, ran on more than just good vibes and scented candles from Target. "What about them?" I asked, genuinely curious where she thought this was going. "Those are your responsibilities now." "Well, your half was always your responsibility, but I'm guessing you thought friendship meant I'd just keep covering everything while you figured out your authentic self, or whatever." The look on her face was absolutely priceless. And I'm talking the kind of priceless that art collectors would mortgage their souls for. It was confusion mixed with indignation, stirred together with a healthy dose of "this is not how I thought this would go." She legitimately looked like someone who'd just been told that Starbucks was permanently closing all locations, and she'd never again be able to order a Vinny iced caramel macchiato with extra caramel drizzle, oat milk, and 2 pumps of vanilla while taking a selfie with the cup. "You're being completely unreasonable," she finally managed to sputter out. "I thought you said we'd be friends." "We are friends," I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge, my beer that I'd bought, with my money, from my grocery run that I'd done by myself because Harper thought grocery shopping was boring. And friends respect each other's boundaries and independence. So I'm independently choosing to move out and respect your boundary of not wanting to be married to me anymore. See how that works? It's beautiful, really. Very mature of us. I cracked open the beer and walked past her toward my bedroom, soon to be my former bedroom, leaving her standing there with her mouth slightly open like a fish trying to understand algebra. "I'll start packing tonight," I called over my shoulder. "Don't worry, though. I'll leave you the good furniture. You know, as a friend." That night, I packed with the efficiency of a man who'd been given a get-out-of-jail-free card and wasn't about to waste it. Every item that went into a box felt like dropping an anchor I'd been carrying. Her problem now, her mortgage, her utilities, her character, housed with its quirky issues that would need someone handy to fix them. And as I taped up the last box and looked around the bedroom that hadn't felt like mine in years, I realized something. The silence, the peace, the complete and total lack of having to anticipate someone else's needs every second of every day. It felt better than any birthday present I could have asked for. Friends, I thought to myself, smiling. Yeah, we can definitely be friends. Just not the kind you were expecting. Harper. Harper tried the guilt routine on Wednesday, which was honestly impressive timing considering I'd only announced my departure 3 days ago, and she'd already cycled through denial, anger, and was now speedrunning her way through bargaining like it was an Olympic sport. I was in the garage, boxing up my tools, the good ones, the ones I collected over years of being the designated fix-it guy for literally everything in her life, when she appeared in the doorway looking like she'd just finished filming a sad montage for a rom-com. "Logan," she said, and her voice had that tremble in it that she used to use when she wanted me to cancel guys' night or agree to visit her parents for the 3rd weekend in a row. "We need to talk about what you're doing here." I looked up from the wrench set I was wrapping in newspaper. "I'm packing my tools." Pretty self-explanatory, really. This is the socket set. Those are the screwdrivers. And that beautiful bastard over there is my drill press that you said was too industrial for the garage, but I kept anyway because I'm not a quitter. "That's not what I mean," she said, stepping into the garage like she was entering a crime scene. "I mean emotionally. You're abandoning me emotionally. You said you'd always support me, that you'd always be there for me, and now you're just leaving?" And there it was, the emotional support card. The trump card she'd been holding on to, probably since the moment she realized that just friends didn't come with the same benefits package as legally bound husband. I had to give her credit. She'd really thought this through. Break up with the guy, keep all the perks, lose none of the responsibilities. It was a hell of a business model, just not one that was going to work on me anymore. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and gave her my biggest, brightest smile. The kind of smile that said, "I'm about to ruin your entire argument and enjoy every second of it." "Harper, I absolutely said I'd always support you emotionally. You're right about that. But here's the thing, and I really need you to hear me on this. That was as a husband. That was part of the marriage subscription plan. Premium tier. All access pass. But we're not married anymore, remember? You downgraded us to the basic friendship package, and that comes with significantly fewer features." Her face went through about 15 different expressions in 3 seconds, which was genuinely entertaining to watch. Confusion, indignation, more confusion, a flash of anger, back to confusion. "That's not. You can't just. Friendship isn't a subscription service, Logan." "Isn't it though?" I asked, leaning against my workbench like I was about to deliver a lecture at a university for people who make terrible decisions. Think about it. Marriage is premium. You get emotional support, financial support, physical support, someone to listen to your work drama, even though you've told the same story about Karen from accounting like 40 times. Friends? Friends get the highlights reel. Friends get the "hey, how's it going" texts and maybe a beer every couple of months. Friends do not, and I cannot stress this enough, get unlimited access to my emotional labor. She just stared at me like I'd started speaking ancient Greek. "This is insane. You're being insane." Am I though? Or am I just setting healthy boundaries in our new friendship? I went back to packing my tools, wrapping each one with the care of a man who knew he'd need them in his new, Harper-free life. See, when you're married, you sign up for the whole package. Good times, bad times. Hey, can you kill this spider? It's the size of a Buick times. But friends? Friends have limits. Friends have boundaries. Friends definitely don't provide 24/7 emotional support like some kind of therapeutic vending machine. I could see her brain trying to find a counterargument, watching the gears turn as she attempted to logic her way out of the corner she'd painted herself into. But I thought, I mean, you're a good person, Logan. Good people don't just abandon their friends when they need support. "You're absolutely right," I said, turning to face her with a socket wrench still in my hand. "I am a good person, which is why, as your friend, I'm going to be honest with you instead of pretending everything's fine. Here's your emotional support for the day. You're going to need to figure out how to handle your own problems now. You're going to need to learn how to fix things when they break, how to manage a household budget, how to deal with stress without having someone else absorb it all for you." That's not me being mean. That's me being a real friend and telling you the truth. She looked like she wanted to cry, and part of me, the part that had been married to her for 5 years, almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered every time she'd called me at work because she couldn't figure out how to reset the router. Every time she'd had a bad day and expected me to drop everything and provide immediate emotional tree-off. Every time she'd treated my time, my energy, and my emotional bandwidth like an unlimited resource that existed solely for her consumption. "When are you moving out?" she asked quietly, and I could tell she was trying a different approach. The defeated, sad approach. The one that was supposed to make me feel guilty and reconsider. "Saturday morning," I replied, going back to my packing. "Marcus is bringing his truck. Should be out of here by noon." "This weekend? That's in 3 days." "Yep. Turns out when you're not emotionally attached to a situation anymore, you can make decisions really quickly. It's super efficient. You should try it sometime." Thursday came and went in a blur of packing and fielding increasingly desperate texts from Harper. Each one was a variation on the same theme. "Can we talk about this? Are you really doing this? This seems really sudden. I think you're making a mistake." I responded to exactly none of them, because friends don't owe each other immediate text responses. Friends can take their time. Friends can even leave messages on read if they're busy living their lives. Friday afternoon, I was loading boxes into my truck. Just a few things I wanted to take early, beat the rush, when Harper came outside with her phone in her hand, and that look on her face that said she'd just had what she thought was a brilliant idea. "The washing machine is making that noise again," she announced, like this was breaking news that required immediate attention. I loaded another box into the truck bed. "That sucks. Aren't you going to look at it?" "Nope. But you always fix the washing machine." "I always fix the washing machine as your husband," I corrected, securing the box with a bungee cord. "As your friend, I'm going to do what any good friend would do and send you helpful resources so you can learn to fix it yourself." I pulled out my phone and, right there in the driveway with her watching, I texted her a YouTube link. The video was titled, "How to Troubleshoot Common Washing Machine Problems, Easy DIY Guide," with a cheerful thumbnail showing some random guy giving a thumbs up next to a washing machine. I added a message. "This guy explains it really well. Super easy to follow. You got this, friend. Thumbs up." The look on her face when she heard her phone buzz and checked the message was worth every penny I'd spent on that washing machine repair 3 months ago. "You've got to be kidding me." "Not even a little bit," I said, loading another box. Friends send each other helpful tutorials. Friends empower each other to learn new skills. Friends don't enable learned helplessness by doing everything for each other. "See, I'm being a great friend right now." She stood there in the driveway, phone in hand, looking like someone who'd just realized that the participation trophy she'd been counting on was actually made of cardboard and regret. "I can't believe you're doing this." "Believe it," I said, closing the truck bed and dusting off my hands. "And hey, if you can't figure out the washing machine, there's always the laundromat on 5th Street. They're open till 9 on weekdays, 10 on weekends. Very reasonable prices. As your friend, I'm happy to provide recommendations." Saturday morning arrived with all the promise of a prison break, and I was up at dawn loading the rest of my stuff with the help of Marcus and his magnificent truck that could fit my entire life in 2 trips. Harper stayed in the bedroom with the door closed, which was probably for the best because I was in too good a mood to deal with any last-minute guilt trips or dramatic speeches. By 11:30, I was done. My keys, house keys, garage keys, the spare keys she'd insisted we make, just in case, were on the kitchen counter next to a note that said, "Thanks for everything. Good luck with the washing machine. Your friend, Logan." My half of the rent was officially canceled. The utilities that had been in my name were switched off, with notifications sent to the landlord that I was off the lease effective immediately. My phone bill, my car insurance, my gym membership, all the little threads that had been tangled up with hers were snipped clean. I stood in the driveway for a minute, looking at the house that had been my prison for the last 2 years, since we'd moved in and Harper had started treating me more like a maintenance crew than a partner. And I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts. Just pure, unadulterated relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally set down something heavy you've been carrying for way too long. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You good, man?" "I'm better than good," I said, climbing into my truck. "I'm free." And as I drove away, With all my worldly possessions secured in the back and absolutely zero obligations waiting for me at my new place, the silence was so good it felt like therapy. The kind of therapy that doesn't cost $200 an hour and actually works. The kind that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone anything anymore except basic human decency. And even that's negotiable, depending on how they treat you. Harper wanted friendship. She got it. Just not the version she'd imagined. 3 days into my new life, I was living like a king. And by king, I mean I was eating cereal for dinner in my underwear, while watching whatever I wanted on TV without someone sighing dramatically every 5 minutes because I wasn't emotionally present during her reality shows about people who flip houses but mostly just argue with each other. My apartment was small, sure, but it was mine. No passive-aggressive notes about leaving dishes in the sink. No surprise visits from Harper's mom, who always looked at me like I was personally responsible for global warming. Just me, my cereal, and the beautiful sound of absolutely nothing demanding my attention. Then my phone rang. Harper's name lit up the screen like a warning signal, and I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Plus, I was feeling pretty good about my boundaries, and I figured this could be entertaining. "What's up, friend?" I answered, mid-bite of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. "Logan." Her voice came through the phone at a pitch that could probably shatter glass. "The rent's due." I swallowed my cereal, took a sip of milk straight from the bowl because I could do that now and nobody was around to judge me, and responded with the calmest voice I could muster. "Okay, so pay it." "What do you mean pay it?" "We always split the rent." "We did split the rent," I confirmed, setting down my bowl and settling deeper into my couch. My couch, from my apartment, in my space. Past tense. When we were married. But I moved out, remember? That whole thing where I packed all my stuff and left? That was me removing myself from the rent situation, both literally and financially. There was a silence on the other end that lasted so long, I actually checked to see if the call had dropped. It hadn't. She was just processing, which apparently took a while when reality didn't match up with the fantasy version of events she'd constructed in her head. "You can't just. I can't afford this place on my own, Logan." "As your friend," I said, and man, this phrase was really becoming my favorite thing in the English language. "I fully support your independence and your journey to financial self-sufficiency. You can do this. I believe in you." "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing," I said, which was technically true even though I was absolutely grinning like an idiot. "I'm being completely serious. You wanted to end our marriage, which is fine. That's your choice. But marriages come with financial partnerships. Friendships don't. Friends don't co-sign on each other's rent. Friends don't cover each other's living expenses. Friends maybe split an appetizer at Applebee's if they're feeling generous. But this isn't fair. You're being completely unfair." And there it was. The fairness argument. The one that people always pull out when they realize that their actions have consequences and they don't like those consequences very much. I could have gone easy on her. I could have been the bigger person and helped her out, spotted her some cash, made this transition easier. But here's the thing about being the bigger person all the time. Eventually, your back hurts from carrying everyone else's weight. "Harper, let me explain something to you about fairness," I said, setting down my cereal bowl and standing up to pace around my tiny living room. Fairness was us being married and splitting responsibilities equally. Fairness was me working my ass off while also doing most of the household maintenance, the cooking, the shopping, and providing emotional support whenever you needed it. Fairness was me jumping through hoops to make you happy while you focused on finding yourself, or whatever that meant. You know what's not fair? Breaking up with someone and then expecting them to keep all the same responsibilities without any of the benefits. That's not fair. That's insane. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing, the little hiccups she got when she was really upset. Old Logan would have immediately backpedaled, apologized, figured out a way to fix this, and make her feel better. New Logan? New Logan stayed on his couch and finished his cereal. "You said you'd always be there for me," she sobbed, playing the greatest hits album of our relationship. "I said a lot of things when I thought we were building a life together," I replied. "But you decided you wanted something different. So now we're friends, and friends have boundaries. Friends have their own apartments and their own rent and their own responsibilities. Welcome to friendship, Harper. It's a lot less convenient than marriage. But hey, you're finding yourself, right? This is all part of the journey." She hung up on me. just straight up disconnected the call, which was probably the smartest thing she'd done in weeks because I was just getting warmed up. I looked at my phone, shrugged, and went back to my cereal. It had gotten a little soggy, but honestly, even soggy cereal in my own apartment beat the hell out of five-star dining in that house with Harper. About an hour later, my phone rang again. Different number this time. I answered it without checking the caller ID because I'm an optimist and occasionally an idiot. Logan, this is Patricia. Harper's mom. Of course it was Harper's mom. We need to talk about what you're doing to my daughter. I closed my eyes and counted to 3, which is what my therapist recommended I do before responding to situations that might make me want to drive my truck into a lake. Hi, Patricia. What can I do for you? You can stop abandoning Harper like this. She's devastated, Logan. She called me crying about the rent, and I can't believe you're being so cruel about this whole situation. Cruel, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air for a second. Patricia, with all due respect, and I mean that as genuinely as I can while talking to someone who's calling to yell at me about a situation they don't fully understand. Harper broke up with me. She ended our marriage. She wanted to be friends. I'm respecting her decision and adjusting our relationship accordingly. But you can't just leave her high and dry like this. Ma'am, I said, and I was using my customer service voice now, the one I used when dealing with particularly difficult clients at work. I'm not leaving her high and dry. I'm leaving her to manage her own adult responsibilities like an adult. She has a job. She has income. She has the same capabilities as any other functioning adult to figure out how to pay her bills. What she doesn't have anymore is a husband who will subsidize her lifestyle while she figures out what she wants to do with her life. That's not how family works. You're absolutely right. I agreed. That's not how family works. But we're not family anymore. Harper made that very clear when she broke up with me. We're friends now. And friends. You can't abandon her like this. Patricia was in full mama bear mode now, which I understood on some level. Nobody wants to see their kid struggling. But Harper wasn't a kid. She was a 30-year-old woman who'd made a choice without thinking through the practical implications. And now she was facing those implications head-on. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said, and I was starting to lose patience now. I'm setting boundaries. Harper decided she didn't want to be married anymore, which is fine. That's her choice to make. But she doesn't get to keep all the benefits of being married while I get none of them. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. You're being selfish. No, Patricia, I'm being fair. Harper wanted independence, and I'm giving her independence. She wanted to find herself, and I'm giving her the space to do that. What I'm not doing is continuing to play the role of provider, protector, and personal assistant while she treats me like a convenient accessory she can keep around for when things get hard. But she needs you. She needed a husband. I corrected. She has a friend. And friends, Patricia, support each other emotionally, but not financially. Friends encourage each other to grow and learn and become self-sufficient. So that's what I'm doing. I'm being the best friend I can be by letting Harper figure this out on her own. There was a long pause, and then Patricia said something I wasn't expecting. You're not the man I thought you were. You're right, I said. I'm not. The man you thought I was would have rolled over and accepted whatever scraps of affection and respect Harper was willing to throw my way while continuing to support her in every possible sense. But that man was miserable, Patricia. That man was dying a slow death of resentment and unappreciated effort. This man is actually happy for the first time in years. She hung up on me too. Apparently, it was genetic. I sat there on my couch, in my quiet apartment, with my soggy cereal and my clear conscience, and I realized something. Every phone call, every guilt trip, every attempt to make me feel bad about setting boundaries just confirmed that I'd made the right decision. These people didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. They missed the convenience of having someone around who would solve all their problems without complaint. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. I can't believe you talk to my mother like that. You're being incredibly childish. I typed back. Friends sometimes disagree with their friends' parents. It happens. Good luck with the rent situation. Maybe check Craigslist for a roommate. I hear there are lots of options. She didn't respond, which meant she was either too angry to form words or she was finally starting to understand that the gravy train had left the station and I wasn't selling tickets anymore. I finished my cereal, rinsed out the bowl, and looked around my apartment. It wasn't much. The walls were still bare. I was using a folding chair as a nightstand, and my bed was basically just a mattress on the floor until I could afford a proper frame. But it was mine. Every single square foot of it was mine, earned with my money, maintained by my effort, and completely free of people who only valued me for what I could do for them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Harper. Fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. I laughed out loud, actually laughed, because the level of delusion required to send that text was honestly impressive. I typed back. I already know what I lost. A mortgage I couldn't afford, a partner who didn't appreciate me, and a mother-in-law who thought I was an ATM with feelings. I'm devastated. Truly. Then I blocked her number for the rest of the day, made myself a sandwich, and watched 3 episodes of a show about people who live in tiny houses. Life was good. Life was quiet. Life was finally, beautifully mine. A week into my glorious new existence, I'd established a pretty solid routine. Wake up whenever I wanted, make coffee without having to steam some fancy milk substitute, go to work, come home, and do absolutely nothing for nobody. It was therapeutic in a way that no amount of couples counseling had ever been. Turns out the best way to fix a broken relationship is to not be in it anymore. Revolutionary concept, I know. Then the calls started. Not just calls, a full-blown campaign of emergencies that all somehow required my immediate attention despite the fact that I no longer lived there and had exactly zero obligation to help. It was like Harper had compiled a list of every possible household disaster and was working through them alphabetically, hoping that eventually something would crack my resolve and I'd come running back like a well-trained golden retriever. Monday morning, 7:30 a.m., my phone lit up. Harper's name flashing across the screen like a warning siren. I was brushing my teeth at the time, standing in my tiny bathroom that didn't have heated floors or a rainfall showerhead or any of the fancy crap Harper had insisted we needed in our house. Just a regular bathroom with regular water pressure, and honestly, it was perfect. I spit out my toothpaste and answered. Yeah. Logan. Oh my God. Thank God you answered. Her voice was at that pitch that suggested either someone was dying or she'd seen a spider. Based on our history, it was probably the spider. The power's out. Like, completely out. I don't know what to do. I rinsed my mouth, dried my face, and walked back into my bedroom to finish getting dressed. Have you checked the breaker box? The what? The breaker box. It's in the garage, gray metal box on the wall, probably has a bunch of switches in it. Sometimes they trip and you just need to flip them back. There was a pause. I don't know what that is. Harper, we've lived in that house for 2 years. I've shown you the breaker box at least 4 times. This was actually true. I'd given her a full house tutorial when we moved in, shown her where everything was, how everything worked, specifically so we wouldn't have moments like this. She'd been on her phone the entire time, probably scrolling through Instagram or texting her friends about how adulting is so hard. Well, I don't remember. Can you just come over and fix it? I pulled a shirt over my head and checked myself in the mirror. Looking good, feeling better. Nope. What do you mean, nope? I mean, no, I cannot come over and fix it. I have a job I need to get to, and also, we're not married anymore, remember? Friends don't typically handle each other's electrical issues. But I need help. And as your friend, I'm helping you by empowering you to solve this yourself. Go to the garage, find the gray box, look for any switches that are pointing the opposite direction from the others, flip them back. Boom. Power restored. You can do this. This is ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. I'm being a great friend, actually. I'm teaching you valuable life skills. You should thank me. I grabbed my keys and wallet. Good luck with the breaker box. I hung up before she could respond, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt like a superhero. Not the kind that saves people from burning buildings, but the kind that saves himself from being used as free labor. That's a different kind of heroism, but it counts. Wednesday afternoon, I was at work, elbow deep in an engine repair, when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I ignored it the first time, and the second time. By the third time, my coworker Jake looked over and said, "You gonna get that, man? Sounds urgent." I wiped my hands on a rag and checked my phone. 6 missed calls from Harper. 6. I called her back, already knowing this was going to be good. Finally, she practically screamed into the phone. "I've been calling you for 20 minutes. I was working. You know, that thing people do to earn money to pay their bills. What's the emergency? The car won't start. I turn the key and it just makes this clicking noise and nothing happens. I walked over to the break room for some privacy, mainly because I knew I was about to say something that would make me laugh, and I didn't need my coworkers thinking I was losing it. Okay, so what do you want me to do about it? Come fix it. You always know what to do with car stuff. Harper, I'm at work. I'm literally at my job, fixing other people's cars, for money. I can't just leave to come fix yours. But I need my car. I have to get to work. As your friend, I said, cracking open a soda from the vending machine, I'd recommend calling AAA, or a tow truck, or using one of those rideshare apps that everyone else in America uses when their car doesn't work. Uber, Lyft, public transportation. The options are endless, really. I don't have AAA. Well, that sounds like a you problem. Probably should have thought about that before you broke up with the guy who had AAA and would have helped you with stuff like this. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Immensely, I admitted, because why lie? Look, I gotta get back to work. But here's a pro tip. If the car's making a clicking noise, it's probably the battery. You can call any mechanic shop and they'll come jump it for you. Or you can ask one of your neighbors. That's what friends do, right? Help each other out. She hung up on me. I was starting to collect hang-ups like Pokemon cards. Gotta catch 'em all. Thursday evening, I was cooking dinner. Actual dinner, with vegetables and everything. Because it turns out cooking for yourself is way more enjoyable when nobody's critiquing your seasoning choices. When my phone rang again, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity is my weakness. What now? The internet's not working. Harper sounded defeated, like she'd been fighting a war and losing badly. Have you tried turning the router off and on again? Yes, I've tried everything. Have you called the internet company? They said it would be a 45-minute wait time. So wait 45 minutes. That's literally their job. They get paid to help you with this stuff. But you could just come over and... No, you didn't even let me finish. Didn't need to. The answer is no. Harper, I need you to understand something, and I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. I am not your personal IT guy. I'm not your handyman. I'm not your emergency contact for every minor inconvenience that happens in your life. We're friends now, and friends don't provide 24/7 technical support. Friends help each other. You're right, friends do help each other. But there's a difference between helping and being taken advantage of. When we were married, I helped you with everything because that's what partners do. But you didn't want a partner anymore. You wanted to be friends. So now you get friend-level help, which is me telling you to call the professionals who are actually paid to deal with this stuff. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what argument to use next. I miss you, she finally said, and her voice was soft, vulnerable, the way it used to sound when we first started dating and everything was still good between us. No, you don't, I said, not unkindly. You miss having someone around to fix all your problems. There's a difference. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Harper. But here's what is fair. You made a choice, and choices have consequences. You wanted independence, and independence means figuring stuff out on your own sometimes. It means sitting on hold with the internet company for 45 minutes. It means learning how to check a breaker box, or jump a car battery, or, I don't know, using Google like the rest of humanity when you don't know how to do something. I heard her sniffle, and part of me, the part that had loved her once upon a time, felt a little bad. But the bigger part of me, the part that had spent years being underappreciated and taken for granted, stood firm. I have to go, she said quietly. My 45 minutes is probably almost up. Good luck with the internet, I said, and I meant it. Not in a sarcastic way, but in a genuine, I hope you figure this out because you're an adult human who should be capable of handling basic household issues kind of way. Friday was blissfully quiet. No calls, no texts, no emergencies. I went to work, came home, ordered pizza, and watched a movie without anyone asking me to pause it every 5 minutes to explain the plot or discuss the deeper meaning of the protagonist's character arc. It was peaceful in a way that I'd forgotten was possible. Saturday morning, I was sleeping in. Actually sleeping in, past 9 a.m., like a decadent lazy person who had no obligations and no one to answer to, when my phone buzzed with a text. I grabbed it, still half asleep, and saw Harper's name. The message read, "Washing machine is flooding. Water everywhere. Help." I looked at the message, looked at my ceiling, looked back at the message. Then I typed out my response with the careful precision of a man who had finally learned where his boundaries were and how to defend them. YouTube, How to turn off water supply to washing machine. It's the valve behind the machine. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. You got this, champ. Thumbs up. Then I turned my phone on silent, rolled over, and went back to sleep. Because friends help friends learn how to help themselves, and I was being the best friend I could possibly be by letting Harper figure out that adulting is hard, but it's a lot harder when you push away the person who was making it easier. When I woke up later, there was a long paragraph text from Harper about how I was the worst person she'd ever met, and how she couldn't believe she'd wasted 5 years on me. I read it, shrugged, and sent back a single emoji, the shrugging guy. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't the bad guy in this story. I was just a guy who'd finally learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you sane. And sanity, it turns out, is way more valuable than being someone's on-call handyman for the rest of your life. 2 weeks into my new life, I was starting to feel like an actual human being again instead of a multi-tool with anxiety. My apartment was still pretty bare bones. I'd managed to acquire an actual bed frame from Facebook Marketplace and a couch that only had one questionable stain that I covered with a throw blanket. But it was mine, and that made it better than any McMansion Harper could have dreamed up. I was coming home from work on a Tuesday evening, covered in grease and smelling like motor oil and poor life choices, when I noticed someone sitting on the steps of the building next to mine. Our apartment complex was one of those places where the buildings were close enough that you could technically have a conversation with your neighbor without raising your voice, but far enough apart that you could pretend you didn't hear them if you wanted to avoid human interaction. The woman on the steps had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, the kind that looked accidental but probably took 15 minutes to achieve, and she was drinking tea from one of those massive mugs that could double as a weapon. She looked up as I walked past, and our eyes met for a second before I did that awkward neighbor thing where you smile, but not too much because you don't want to seem like a serial killer. "Rough day," she called out, and her voice had this amused tone to it that made me stop walking. I looked down at myself. Grease-stained work shirt, jeans that had seen better days, hands that probably needed a wire brush to get clean. Is it that obvious? You look like you either wrestled a car engine or lost a fight with a very aggressive mechanical bull. She took a sip of her tea, and I noticed she was trying not to smile. "I'm going with car engine based on the smell." "Mechanic," I confirmed, walking a little closer but maintaining a respectful distance because strange woman, evening time, don't be creepy. "Logan, I live in 4B. "Lila," she said, and she did smile then, full-on grinned like I'd said something funny. "4A, right next door? I've seen you moving in over the past couple weeks. You're the guy with the excellent taste in furniture that includes camping chairs and a mini fridge." I laughed despite myself. "Hey, that mini fridge is a classic. Bought it in college, still runs like a champion. That's quality craftsmanship right there." "Nothing says I've got my life together like a dorm room refrigerator," she agreed, and there was zero judgment in her voice, just good-natured teasing. "Want some tea? I made way too much, and I'm trying to avoid going back inside where my laptop is waiting to remind me that I have deadlines." I should have said no. I should have been a normal person and gone inside, showered, and continued my hermit lifestyle. But there was something about the way she asked, casual, friendly, like she actually wanted company instead of feeling obligated to offer, that made me say, "Yeah, actually, that sounds good. Let me just wash my hands so I don't contaminate your mug with whatever industrial fluids I'm currently covered in." 5 minutes later, I was back outside, hands scrubbed mostly clean, sitting on the steps next to Lila with a mug of tea that tasted like honey and something herbal I couldn't identify. It was weird, sitting there with a complete stranger, but also kind of nice. No pressure, no expectations, just two people drinking tea and watching the sun set behind the complex's very mediocre landscaping. "So," Lila said after a comfortable silence, "I have to ask, and feel free to tell me to mind my own business, but did you just go through a breakup? Because I've been watching you move in, and there's been a definite lack of feminine products in your box collection. Just lots of tools, car parts, and what looked like a concerning amount of cereal boxes." I nearly spit out my tea. "That obvious, huh?" The camping chair was my first clue. The fact that you're using a toolbox as a coffee table was the second. But really, it was the smile. She turned to look at me, her expression curious but kind. "You've been smiling every time you come home." Like, genuinely smiling. People who just got out of good relationships Don't smile like that. Divorced? I said, deciding that honesty was probably easier than dancing around it. Well, separated. Paperwork's in progress. Wife decided she wanted to find herself, and that apparently required not being married to me anymore. Ouch. Nah, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. It's actually been great. Turns out being single is way better than being married to someone who treats you like a combination ATM, handyman, and emotional support animal. Lila laughed, and it was one of those real laughs that made her whole face light up. Okay, that's the most honest post-breakup assessment I've ever heard. Most people do the whole "it was mutual" or "we grew apart" thing. You went straight to "she used me for money and repairs." Because that's what happened, I said, shrugging. She broke up with me on my birthday, told me we could still be friends, and then was genuinely shocked when I treated her like an actual friend instead of a wife with no benefits. Moved out a week later, and she's been having a full-scale meltdown ever since because turns out she can't figure out how to check a breaker box without me. On your birthday? Lila's eyes widened. That's cold. Like ice cold. That's villain origin story cold. Night? I had cake and everything. Candles were still burning when she launched into her breakup speech. She'd rehearsed it too. It was like watching a TED Talk about why I wasn't good enough anymore. Lila shook her head, still grinning. You know what? You handled that like a pro. Most guys would have either lost their minds or turned into a doormat. You went full-on malicious compliance. That's impressive. Malicious compliance. I repeated, testing the phrase. I like that. That's exactly what it is. She wanted friendship, so I gave her friendship. Just not the version she imagined in her head, where I continued to do everything I did before, but without any of the relationship stuff. Let me guess, Lila said, leaning back on her elbows and looking way too comfortable for someone sitting on concrete steps. She keeps calling you with emergencies that aren't actually emergencies? Every single day. I counted on my fingers. Power's out, car won't start, internet's down, washing machine's flooding. I've become a human Google search, except instead of solutions, I just send her YouTube links and tell her to figure it out. That's beautiful, Lila said, and she sounded like she genuinely meant it. That's the kind of petty revenge that doesn't actually hurt anyone, but teaches a valuable lesson. You're like a Zen master of boundaries. Zen master of boundaries, I laughed. That's going on my business cards. Right under recovering husband. How long were you married? 5 years. Together for 7. And honestly, the first 2 years were great. Then we bought the house, and she started treating me more like staff than a partner. Every conversation became a task list. Every day off became a list of projects she needed me to complete. I don't think she said thank you in the last year of our marriage. Lila made a face like she'd tasted something sour. That's depressing. It was, I agreed. But this? I gestured around at the mediocre apartment complex with its flickering parking lot lights and slightly overgrown grass. This is actually pretty great. Nobody's asking me to fix anything. Nobody's mad at me for not reading their mind. Nobody's disappointed that I'm not living up to some impossible standard they set without telling me. To freedom, Lila said, raising her mug. To freedom, I echoed, clinking my mug against hers. And to neighbors who don't judge you for having camping chairs. Oh, I'm definitely judging you for the camping chairs, she said, grinning. But in like an affectionate way. They show character. Poor judgment, but character. We sat there for another hour, talking about nothing important and everything at once. She told me she was a freelance graphic designer who worked from home and was currently procrastinating on a logo design for a company that sold organic dog food. I told her about my job at the shop, about Marcus and the guys I worked with, about how nice it was to come home to silence instead of a list of things I'd done wrong that day. You know what I noticed? Lila said as the sky turned from orange to purple. You haven't checked your phone once since you sat down. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and looked at the screen. 7 missed calls from Harper, 12 texts, and what looked like the beginning of an email. Huh, I didn't even feel it vibrate. You gonna check those? Nope, I said, putting the phone back in my pocket. It's probably just another emergency that isn't actually an emergency. She'll figure it out. Or she won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. I like you, Lila said decisively. You're funny, you're self-aware, and you don't seem like an axe murderer. That's like top 3 qualities in a neighbor. I like you too, I said, and I meant it. You make good tea, You don't ask intrusive questions disguised as concern, and you appreciate the aesthetic value of camping furniture. Also top 3 neighbor qualities. We should do this again, she said, standing up and stretching. The tea thing, I mean. Not the you covered in grease thing. Although I won't judge if that's your signature look. The tea thing sounds great, I agreed, standing up and handing her back the mug. Fair warning though, my ex lives like 20 minutes from here, and she's currently in the trying to guilt me into coming back phase of grief. So if you see a crazy woman banging on my door at weird hours, that's probably her. Noted, Lila said. If I see a crazy woman, I'll pretend I don't hear anything and maybe turn my music up. Plausible deniability. You really are the perfect neighbor. She laughed, and I headed back to my apartment feeling lighter than I had in months. It was weird how a simple conversation with a stranger could remind you that there were still good people in the world. People who didn't want anything from you except maybe some company and conversation. People who laughed at your jokes instead of sighing like you'd personally disappointed them. As I unlocked my door and stepped into my sparse but peaceful apartment, I realized something. This was the first time since the divorce that I'd thought about the future with something resembling optimism. Not because I was planning some grand revenge or waiting for Harper to realize what she'd lost, but because I'd just spent an hour with someone who treated me like an actual person instead of a problem to be fixed or a resource to be exploited. My phone buzzed with another text from Harper. I glanced at it. We need to talk. This is important. I typed back, busy, try Google. And then I turned off my phone completely, made myself a sandwich, and went to bed feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. 3 weeks after the Great Tea Summit with Lila, my life had developed a routine that didn't suck, which was honestly a huge upgrade from my previous existence. Work, home, occasional tea sessions with Lila that had evolved into full-on hangouts, and absolutely zero emergency calls from Harper because I'd started letting them all go to voicemail. It was peaceful. It was calm. It was everything I'd been missing during 5 years of marriage to a woman who thought self-care meant making everyone else's life harder. Meanwhile, Harper was apparently having what I can only describe as a complete infrastructure collapse. I know this because Marcus, my buddy from work who still lived in the old neighborhood, had been giving me updates that I didn't ask for but secretly enjoyed. Dude, Marcus said one day during lunch break, biting into a sandwich the size of a small child. Your ex put up an ad looking for a roommate. Have you seen this thing? It's insane. He pulled out his phone and showed me the posting. I started reading and immediately began choking on my own sandwich. Roommate wanted. The ad screamed in all caps, because apparently Harper had discovered the internet equivalent of yelling. Must be financially stable, handy with repairs, good with technology, emotionally mature, quiet, clean, and willing to help with household tasks. Must have own transportation and be available for occasional emergency situations. Prefer someone calm under pressure who can handle home maintenance issues. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. This isn't a roommate ad, I said, showing it to Jake who'd walked over to see what we were laughing about. This is a job posting. She's literally trying to hire another me. Available for occasional emergency situations, Jake read out loud, barely containing his laughter. What kind of emergencies? Like, the Wi-Fi is down and I don't know how to restart a router emergencies? Exactly those emergencies, I confirmed. She's looking for someone who will basically be her husband without any of the husband benefits. Good luck with that, Harper. Marcus nearly spit out his soda. How much is she offering to pay this person? Let's see. I scrolled down. Split rent, split utilities. So she wants someone to pay half the rent and be her personal handyman, tech support, and emotional stability coordinator. That's not a roommate. That's a sucker. How many responses has she gotten? Jake asked. I checked the ad. Posted 3 days ago. 0 responses. None. Absolutely none. Turns out people can spot a bad deal when they see one. The 3 of us stood there in the break room, looking at this sad, desperate ad, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but just nothing. No anger, no bitterness, no desire to gloat. Just a kind of distant pity for someone who'd thrown away something good because she thought she could do better and was now discovering that better didn't exist. You good, man? Marcus asked, probably noticing that I'd gone quiet. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm actually great. I just realized that I don't care anymore. Like, at all. She can figure it out or not figure it out. Either way, it's not my circus and definitely not my monkeys. That evening, I was helping Lila fix a loose board on her garden gate. She had a tiny patio area that she'd turned into an actual garden with plants and everything, which was impressive considering our apartment complex's strict, no modifications policy that everyone ignored when she asked me about Harper. "So your ex," Lila said, holding the gate steady while I tightened the screws. "Is she still calling you with emergencies?" "Not as much," I said, focused on getting the screw at the right angle. "I think she's finally starting to get the message. Either that or she's found someone else to bother." "Marcus showed me that roommate ad," Lila admitted, and when I looked up, she was trying not to smile. That was something. Must be emotionally mature and good with home repairs. She basically described a therapist who moonlights as a contractor. She described a husband. I corrected, moving to the next screw. She just doesn't want to admit it. She wants all the benefits of being married without any of the commitment or emotional labor on her end. "That's not how any of this works," Lila said, which was basically the thesis statement of my entire divorce. "Nope, but she's gonna learn that the hard way." I tightened the last screw and tested the gate. Solid. No more wobbling. "There you go. Good as new." "You're really good at this," Lila observed, inspecting my work. "The fixing things thing. Do you actually enjoy it, or did you just get good at it because you had to?" It was a good question, and I had to think about it for a second. Both, I guess. I like working with my hands, solving problems, making things work better. What I didn't like was being expected to fix everything all the time without any appreciation or even a basic thank you. It stopped being satisfying and started being just exhausting. "That makes sense," Lila said, and we walked back to her patio where she'd set up 2 chairs and made lemonade because apparently she was the kind of person who just made lemonade on random weeknights like it was a normal thing to do. "You know what the difference is between you helping me with my gate and you helping Harper with whatever crisis she was having?" "What?" I asked, and I said thank you. "And I'm making you lemonade because I appreciate it." She handed me a glass. "It's not that complicated. People just forget that appreciation is part of the deal." I took a sip of the lemonade. It was perfect. Not too sweet, not too tart, just right. "This is really good. See? Appreciation. It's a revolutionary concept." She settled into her chair, looking way too pleased with herself. "Also, I made cookies earlier. They're inside if you want some." "You made cookies?" Procrastination baking. I had a deadline, so naturally I decided to make snickerdoodles instead of working. It's a disease, really. I laughed, and it struck me how easy this was. Sitting on a patio, drinking lemonade, talking about nothing important with someone who didn't need anything from me except maybe some company and conversation. When was the last time I'd felt this relaxed around another person? Probably college, before adult responsibilities and bad marriages had turned life into a series of obligations and disappointments. "You're doing it again," Lila said, watching me with those observant eyes that noticed way too much. "Doing what?" "Smiling like you just won the lottery. You do that a lot lately." "That's because I kind of did win the lottery," I said. "The divorce lottery. The getting out before it got worse lottery. The finding out that life is actually pretty good when you're not in a toxic relationship lottery. Those are all the same lottery," she pointed out. "Yeah, but I'm really, really grateful for it, so I'm counting it multiple times." We sat there as the sun went down, and she told me about the dog food logo she was still procrastinating on, and I told her about this classic Mustang that had come into the shop that was basically automotive art. Normal conversation. Easy conversation. The kind where you don't have to watch what you say or worry about accidentally triggering some emotional landmine you didn't know existed. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said after a while. "Sure. Do you ever miss it?" Not her, specifically, but like being with someone. I thought about it, really thought about it. I miss the idea of what I thought I had. The partnership, the companionship, the having someone to share stuff with. But the actual reality of what I had. No. I don't miss being taken for granted. I don't miss feeling like an employee in my own marriage. I don't miss the constant criticism disguised as helpful feedback. "That's fair," Lila said. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't one of those guys who swears off relationships forever and becomes weird and bitter about it." "Nah," I said. "I'm not swearing off relationships. I'm just way more selective now about who I spend my time and energy on." Life's too short to waste it on people who don't appreciate you. Words to live by, she agreed, raising her lemonade glass. To not wasting time on people who suck. To not wasting time on people who suck. I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Harper's name. The text read, "I saw you posted something on Facebook about fixing a gate. Are you dating someone?" I stared at the message for a second, trying to figure out when I'd supposedly posted anything on Facebook, which I barely used. Then I realized, Marcus. Marcus must have posted something about me helping Lila. Or maybe Jake had. Or hell, maybe Lila had posted a picture of her fixed gate and thanked me in the comments. Didn't really matter. I typed back, "Not dating. Just helping a friend. You know, like friends do." Then I added, "Also, friends don't monitor each other's social media. Might want to work on that." Lila noticed me texting and raised an eyebrow. The ex. Yep. Apparently she's stalking my social media now. Wants to know if I'm dating someone. "Are you?" Lila asked, and there was something in her voice that I couldn't quite read. "Not at the moment," I said honestly, "but I'm not opposed to it. If the right person came along. Someone who actually appreciates me and doesn't treat me like a combination ATM and maintenance crew. Someone who makes you lemonade and cookies?" Lila suggested, smiling. "That would definitely be a point in their favor." I agreed, smiling back. My phone buzzed again. "Harper, this is really hurtful, Logan. I can't believe you're moving on already." I showed the text to Lila, who read it and made a face like she'd smelled something bad. "She broke up with you, and now she's mad that you're living your life? That's Olympic-level audacity." "Right." I typed back to Harper. "You broke up with me, remember? On my birthday? With cake. You don't get to be upset about what I do with my life now. We're friends, remember? Friends are happy for each other." I put my phone on silent and shoved it back in my pocket. You know what? I'm done engaging with this. She can be mad all she wants. I've got lemonade to drink, and allegedly there are cookies somewhere. "There are definitely cookies," Lila confirmed, standing up. "Come on, let's get them before I eat them all myself." As I followed her inside, past the patio she'd turned into a little garden paradise, into her apartment that was cozy and lived in and felt like an actual home instead of a showroom, I realized something. This was what I'd been missing. Not romance necessarily, but genuine human connection. Someone who treated me like a person instead of a resource. Someone who said thank you and made lemonade and baked cookies not because they wanted something, but because they enjoyed my company. And if Harper couldn't understand why that was infinitely better than what we'd had, well, that was her problem to figure out. I had cookies to eat. A month into my new life, things with Lila had evolved from friendly neighbors who occasionally drink tea to people who hang out multiple times a week and actually enjoy each other's company. We'd fallen into this comfortable rhythm where I'd help her with random household stuff. Not because she couldn't do it herself, but because she actually asked nicely and said thank you like a normal human being. And she'd feed me because apparently I'd been living on a diet of cereal and takeout, and she found this personally offensive. It was a Tuesday evening, and we were at her place having dinner. Actual dinner. She'd made this pasta thing with vegetables and chicken that tasted like someone had actually put effort and seasoning into it, which was a novel experience after years of Harper's cooking that mostly consisted of ordering Uber Eats and transferring it to our nice plates so it looked homemade. We were mid-conversation about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. It absolutely is, fight me, when my phone rang. Harper's name lit up the screen like a warning beacon. I'd unblocked her number a few days ago in a moment of weakness, thinking maybe she'd finally moved on. That was clearly a mistake. I declined the call and went back to my pasta. Sorry, where were we? Right? Bruce Willis and the true meaning of Christmas. Lila was looking at me with this amused expression. You gonna get that? Nope. If it's important, she'll leave a voicemail. And if it's not important, she'll call back 17 times until I answer, at which point I'll know it's definitely not important. My phone immediately started ringing again. I declined it again. See? Not important. You're ice cold, Lila said, but she was grinning. I respect it. The phone rang a third time. I sighed, put down my fork, and answered. What's up, Harper? Where are you? Her voice had that edge to it, the one she used when she was working herself up into a full dramatic production. Having dinner. What? With who? A friend. Again, why? There was a pause. and I could practically hear her brain processing this information and coming to all the wrong conclusions, which were probably actually the right conclusions, but she didn't need to know that yet. Are you with Lila? How do you even know her name? I asked, genuinely curious. I have my sources. Are you dating her? I looked across the table at Lila, who was watching this conversation unfold with barely contained amusement. Harper, even if I was dating someone, which is none of your business since you broke up with me, I wouldn't need to report it to you. We're friends, remember? Friends don't owe each other detailed relationship updates. I just think it's really suspicious that you've moved on so quickly, she said, and her voice had shifted to that wounded tone that used to make me feel guilty, but now just made me tired. We were together for 7 years, Logan. 7 years. And you're already having cozy dinners with your neighbor? Harper, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You broke up with me. On my birthday. You told me you wanted to find yourself, and that we should be friends. So I'm being your friend. Friends are happy when their friends are happy. Friends don't interrogate each other about who they have dinner with. This is different, and you know it. How is it different? Because, she stopped, clearly realizing that she'd backed herself into a logical corner. It just is. I can't believe you do this to me. Do what to you exactly? Exist? Have friends? Eat pasta. I was getting frustrated now, and Lila must have noticed because she reached across the table and squeezed my hand supportively. Harper, I'm going to say this one more time as clearly as I can. What I do with my life is no longer your concern. You gave up the right to have opinions about my personal life when you decided you didn't want to be married to me anymore. But I saw you with her. Harper's voice was rising now, getting shrill. I drove by your apartment complex yesterday, and I saw you two on her patio, laughing and looking all cozy. Okay, that was creepy. That was legitimately stalker-level behavior. You drove to my apartment? Harper, that's not normal. That's not something friends do. That's something people do right before they get a restraining order filed against them. I wasn't stalking you. I was in the area. My apartment is 30 minutes from where you live. You weren't in the area. You specifically drove there to spy on me. That's stalking, Harper. That's the literal definition of stalking. Silence on the other end. Then, so you were dating her. Even if I was, and I'm not confirming or denying anything because, again, none of your business. You have zero right to be upset about it. You left me. You ended our marriage. You told me we'd be better as friends. Friends don't get jealous when their friends date other people. We only broke up a month ago. You broke up with me a month ago. I corrected. I'm guessing you'd been mentally checked out of this relationship for way longer than that. So don't act like I'm the bad guy here for moving on with my life. I heard her sniffle, and despite everything, despite all the frustration and anger and exhaustion, I felt a tiny pang of something that might have been sympathy. But then I remembered every emergency call, every guilt trip, every expectation that I'd continue to be her personal assistant without any of the benefits of being her partner, and that sympathy evaporated like water on hot asphalt. I have to go, I said. My pasta's getting cold. Have a good night, Harper. I hung up before she could respond and looked at Lila, who was trying very hard not to laugh. I'm sorry, I said. That was incredibly awkward, and you shouldn't have had to witness it. Are you kidding? That was amazing, Lila said, letting the laughter out. You handled that perfectly. Firm boundaries, no wavering. And you called her out on the stalking thing, which was honestly pretty creepy. She drove by my apartment to spy on me. I said, still processing that particular detail. That's insane, right? That's objectively insane behavior. Completely insane, Lila confirmed. Also, for the record, your pasta is not getting cold because I put it in the microwave when you were on the phone. I'm very considerate like that. You're the best, I said, and I meant it. So, Lila said, bringing my reheated pasta back to the table. Are we dating? I nearly choked on the water I just sipped. Are we? I don't know, she said, sitting back down with this mischievous smile. You were very careful not to confirm or deny it to your ex. I'm curious what the actual answer is. I said, trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation without making a complete idiot of myself. I like you. A lot. I like spending time with you. I like that you make me lemonade and feed me actual food and don't treat me like a combination ATM and repair service. But I also don't want to rush into anything or make you uncomfortable or... Logan, she interrupted, still smiling. I like you too. I have liked you since the tea thing. I was just waiting for you to figure out that moving on from your ex didn't make you a bad person. Oh, I said, feeling my face heat up like a teenager. That's good to know. So, she said, taking a bite of her pasta. Do you want to be dating? Like, officially? Or do you need more time? I thought about it for exactly half a second. Yes, I would like that. To be dating. Officially. Cool, Lila said, like we'd just decided what movie to watch instead of making an actual relationship decision. Now can we please finish this conversation about Die Hard? Because I have strong opinions, and you're wrong. We spent the rest of the evening debating Christmas movies, and at some point, I ended up on her couch with her leaning against me. And it felt so natural and easy and right that I couldn't believe I'd spent 5 years in a marriage where everything felt like work. My phone buzzed around 10 p.m. A text from Harper. I just saw you with Lila. Are you two really together? Wait, what? I looked at Lila, who checked her own phone and made a face. She's outside. She's literally parked outside right now watching your apartment. I got up and looked out the window. Sure enough, there was Harper's car parked across the street, and I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. This is actually unhinged, I said. This is restraining order territory. Want me to call the cops? Lila asked, and she sounded like she was actually considering it. No, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm going to handle this once and for all. I walked outside, and Lila followed me despite my protests that she didn't need to be part of this drama. Harper saw us coming and got out of her car, and her face was blotchy from crying and her yoga pants had a stain on them, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Logan, she said, and her voice cracked. Please, can we just talk? Harper, you need to go home, I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. You can't keep showing up at my apartment. You can't keep calling me every time you don't like what I'm doing with my life. We're not married anymore. We're barely even friends at this point. But She looked at Lila, then back at me, and something in her face changed. Are you dating my neighbor? I'm not your neighbor, Lila said pleasantly. I'm his neighbor. You live 30 minutes away, remember? You had to drive here specifically to stalk him. Harper's face went red. I wasn't stalking. I just wanted to see if he was happy without you. Lila finished. Because he is. Really, genuinely happy. Happier than I've ever seen him based on the stories he's told me about your marriage. I probably should have stopped Lila, but honestly, she was saying everything I'd been thinking for weeks. Harper looked like she'd been slapped. As your friend, I said, putting emphasis on the word. I'm happy to report that yes, I'm dating Lila. We're together. And before you say anything about how fast this happened or how inappropriate it is, remember that you're the one who ended our marriage. You don't get to police who I date or when I date them. Harper stood there, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Finally, she just said, I can't believe this is happening. Believe it, I said, not unkindly. Now please go home, Harper. Move on with your life like you wanted to. Find yourself. Be independent. But do it somewhere that isn't outside my apartment at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. She got back in her car without another word, and we watched her drive away. Lila turned to me and said, That was intense. You okay? Yeah, I said, and I realized I actually was. I think that was closure. The messy, uncomfortable kind, but closure nonetheless. Good, Lila said, taking my hand. Now can we go back inside? I made brownies earlier, and they're getting cold. You made brownies too? Procrastination baking strikes again. I really need to work on my deadline management skills. As we walked back inside, hand in hand, I looked back once at the spot where Harper's car had been. Part of me felt bad for her. She was clearly struggling, but the bigger part of me felt relieved. Relieved that I'd set boundaries. Relieved that I'd moved on. Relieved that I'd found someone who actually appreciated me instead of just using me. That night, Lila and I toasted to poetic justice with cheap wine and those brownies she'd made. And I realized something. Revenge isn't about making someone else miserable. It's about being so happy with your own life that their opinion of you doesn't matter anymore. A year later, it was my birthday again. Same date, completely different life. I woke up in Lila's apartment. Our apartment now, technically, since I'd moved in 3 months ago, and there was already a cake on the counter. A real cake, homemade, with frosting that said, "Thanks for not being a jerk," in wobbly letters that made me laugh so hard I nearly cried. You like it? Lila asked, appearing from the bedroom in pajamas and bedhead. I love it, I said, pulling her into a hug. It's perfect. She also got me a toolbox with a card that read, "For fixing everything except people." I laughed until my ribs hurt because it was funny and true and exactly the kind of gift that showed she actually knew me. Meanwhile, word through Marcus was that Harper had moved back in with her mom after getting evicted. Apparently, Friendship didn't cover Wi-Fi bills either. Her latest Instagram caption read, "Sometimes life forces you to start over," which I translated as, "I miss Logan's rent money." I didn't feel bad. I felt free. Now, I run my own small repair business from home, and Lila and I live in a cozy house with a porch and a dog named Muffin, who's basically a potato with legs. She makes tea every morning, I fix whatever breaks, and we split everything 50-50 like actual partners do. Every now and then, I get a random text from Harper. "Hope you're well, friend." I always reply with my favorite line, "Absolutely." Because here's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't dramatic or vindictive. It's not about making someone else miserable or proving a point. The best revenge is building a life so good, so peaceful, so genuinely happy that your ex's opinion becomes completely irrelevant. Harper wanted to find herself. I found myself too. Turned out I was a guy who deserved appreciation, partnership, and someone who actually knew how to restart a router. She got independence. I got peace, laughter, and a neighbor who actually bakes. And that, my friends, is how I turned the worst birthday of my life into the best decision I ever made. My fiancée said, "I'm moving in with my boss, Jamie. We're having a baby together." I replied, "Congratulations," then canceled her engagement ring, returned her car, and changed every password. 6 hours later, she was at my door sobbing that Jamie had kicked her out. It was a regular Thursday. You know, the kind of day that tastes like burnt coffee and unpaid overtime. 2 p.m., caffeine running low, brain running on fumes, and my life still had the illusion of normalcy. I was halfway through staring blankly at an Excel sheet that looked more like a modern art piece when my phone buzzed. Oliver, my fiancé's voice came through, sharp and businesslike, the tone she reserved for quarterly meetings and passive-aggressive brunches with her mother. "Hey, babe," I said, rubbing my temple, waiting for the usual complaint about traffic, coworkers, or how her Starbucks order was once again a tragic misunderstanding of her worth. But nope. This time, the universe said, "Let's spice things up." "I'm moving in with my boss," she said. No hesitation. No build-up. Just a drive-by emotional shooting. "His name's Jamie. We're having a baby together." I blinked twice, mostly because my brain was buffering. The ceiling fan above me hummed like a soundtrack to my own stupidity. There was a pause long enough to host a full TED Talk and maybe a live Q&A. Then, calmly, like a man announcing a weather update, I said, "Congratulations." That was it. No yelling, no sobbing, no dramatic, "You'll regret this" moment. Just a calm so unnerving it could have been used as a psychological weapon. "You're not going to fight for me?" she asked, her voice suddenly dripping with something between guilt and disappointment, like she expected me to deliver a heartfelt monologue and win her back with violins swelling in the background. "Fight for what, Lily?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "You're moving in with your boss and pregnant with his child, not joining a pottery class." Silence. Then a click. Call ended. My life rebooted. For about a minute, I just sat there, staring at my phone like it might deliver a punchline. Spoiler, it didn't. The only thing that came through was a notification from Domino's, half off on 2 large pizzas. Honestly, great timing. I wish I could say I was shocked, but deep down, part of me had seen it coming. The late nights, the new perfume, the way she'd start sentences with "Jamie thinks," like the man was Moses handing her commandments. And the way she suddenly started dressing like a LinkedIn influencer. Neutrals, high heels, confidence that wasn't hers. Yeah, the clues were there. I just chose to ignore them because love makes you stupid, and I was practically a PhD holder. I put my phone down, stared at the stack of wedding magazines she'd left on the coffee table, and laughed. Not a sad laugh, not even an angry one, just that half-insane, half-enlightened kind that makes your neighbors wonder if you've finally snapped. Somewhere in the background, my laptop dinged with a work email from HR about mandatory positivity training. Oh, the irony. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It just slides into your afternoon like a bad software update, messes up your system, and forces you to reboot. So, I did what any sane man would do in that moment. I made coffee. Strong enough to wake up a dead conscience. As the machine gurgled like it was choking on my dignity, I replayed her words in my head. I'm moving in with my boss. We're having a baby together. The delivery was so clean, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror between meetings. I could practically see her filing the emotional paperwork in her head. Item 1, quit fiancé. Item 2, relocate to boss's penthouse. Item 3, justify it with vague talk about destiny. Honestly, impressive efficiency. I walked to the living room and looked around. The throw pillows she insisted on buying, the live, laugh, love sign that I'd always hated but tolerated because love does that to you. I stared at it and muttered, "You forgot leave." I wasn't heartbroken. Not yet, anyway. It was more like watching a train crash in slow motion and realizing you were the idiot who built the tracks. I sat on the couch, coffee in hand, scrolling through old photos of us on my phone. There we were at the beach, smiling like life was one long Instagram ad. Another one, her holding a puppy, captioned, "Our future baby practice." Oh, the foreshadowing. Except the baby was apparently for Jamie. You ever notice how every happy memory turns into comedy material after a breakup? I started narrating my own slideshow like a bad stand-up routine. Here's Lily at Christmas pretending to like my family. Here's Lily at my promotion party pretending she didn't secretly hate my coworkers. And here's Lily pretending fidelity was still trendy. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on the rug. Honestly worth it. Then, my phone buzzed again. I stared at it, half expecting round 2 of her announcement. Maybe something like, "By the way, can you drop off my yoga mat?" But it wasn't her. It was my friend Mason texting, "You coming to poker night?" I typed back, "Can't. My fiancé just got a promotion to side chick." He called immediately. "Dude, what the hell happened?" I told him everything, and he just whistled. "Bro, that's not a breakup. That's a plot twist." "Yeah," I said. "Apparently, I've been guest starring in a corporate romance drama." He laughed for 5 solid minutes. Then, in true best friend fashion, he said, "You want me to come over with wings and whiskey?" Tempting, but no. I wanted silence. The kind that feels like detox. After hanging up, I wandered into the bedroom. Her closet door was open, half her clothes gone, the other half hanging there like confused survivors of a fashion apocalypse. On the dresser sat the engagement ring box I'd left open that morning when I kissed her goodbye before work. I picked it up, stared at the stupidly sparkly diamond, and thought, that rock cost more than my car's down payment. The kind of realization that makes your blood boil and your credit score cry. I put it back in the box, closed it gently, and placed it in the kitchen drawer next to the takeout menus, where all bad decisions belong. Then I did something productive. I opened my laptop and Googled how to emotionally unsubscribe from a relationship. The results? Mostly inspirational quotes written by people who've clearly never had to cancel a joint gym membership. I closed it, sighed, and said to no one. Step 1. Stop paying for her Spotify. That's when it hit me. Not the heartbreak, but the absurdity. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a cleanup job. My life had just been hacked by an amateur, and it was time for a full system restore. Still, before any of that, I had to process the sheer ridiculousness of it all. I mean, who does that? Moves in with their boss and calls their fiancé about it during work hours? That's not even classy betrayal. That's Walmart betrayal. Discounted, disorganized, and available in bulk. I poured another cup of coffee, because if you're going to have a life crisis, you might as well be caffeinated, and sat back on the couch. I tried to imagine her breaking the news to Jamie. "Hey, I told Oliver about us." And Jamie probably said something like, "Oh, cool. Can you handle my calendar invites while I go tell my wife?" Oh yeah, I'd met Jamie once. The kind of guy who calls himself a visionary because he has a ring light and a LinkedIn premium account. Slick hair, fake smile, wore loafers without socks. Classic red flag behavior. I remember shaking his hand at a company gala. He had that firm, 2-second handshake that screams I rehearse in the mirror. Lily looked at him that night like he hung the moon, while I stood there holding her clutch like an idiot. Should have known. I finished my coffee, stood up, and looked out the window. The world looked the same. People walking dogs, cars honking, someone arguing over a parking spot. But everything inside me had changed. It's wild how one phone call can shift your entire reality. One minute you're planning a wedding menu. The next, you're deleting joint playlists. I won't lie. I felt the sting, the betrayal, the absurdity, the insult to my intelligence. But underneath it, there was also this strange calm. Like my brain finally understood what my gut had been screaming for months. She was never the one. And honestly, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Nope. If she expected me to chase her like a rom-com hero in the rain, she picked the wrong genre. I was more of a dark comedy guy now. So, I took a deep breath, grabbed my car keys, and decided to drive. Not aimlessly, just far enough to let the shock settle. I ended up at a diner off the highway, the kind with neon signs and waitresses who call you Han. I ordered pancakes at 3 p.m. because why not? When life falls apart, carbs are therapy. The waitress poured my coffee and said, "You look like you just got bad news." I smirked. Something like that. My fiancé just got promoted. She blinked. Promoted? Yeah, I said, stirring my coffee. To mistress. She laughed so hard she almost spilled the pot. Honey, you'll be just fine. And for the first time that day, I actually believed it. By the time I left the diner, the world didn't feel so heavy. The air was crisp, my stomach was full, and my phone was mercifully silent. Somewhere between the first sip of coffee and the last bite of pancake, I realized something simple. I didn't lose her. She downgraded herself. I started the car, looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and said, "Congratulations, Lily. You just set me free." Then I drove home, ready for whatever came next. If heartbreak was a fire, I didn't pour gasoline on it. I doused it with logic, caffeine, and just a pinch of petty. Friday morning, 8 a.m., I woke up to sunlight slapping me in the face and a quiet so beautiful it almost felt illegal. No Lily yelling about her lost charger. No curling iron hissing like a venomous snake. No podcast called Women Who Manifest too loudly echoing through the apartment. Just me, my coffee, and peace that tasted like freedom and roast beans. I won't lie, for a split second I almost missed her until I saw the pile of his and hers mugs on the counter and realized, congratulations to me, they were now all mine. I poured coffee into the Boss Babe mug just out of spite. Don't judge me. Revenge caffeine tastes better. The logical part of my brain took over before breakfast was done. If she wanted to move in with her boss and play house, fine. But I was about to perform a full system purge. Oliver 2.0, post-Lily edition. First stop? The jewelry store. You ever walk into a jewelry store after a breakup? It's like entering a battlefield with diamond casualties everywhere. The guy behind the counter looked at me like he'd seen my type 100 times. Men with that, she took my piece. I'll take her sparkle energy. I slid the box across the counter. Bought this 2 months ago. Engagement ring. Never worn, except for Instagram photos. He gave me that sympathetic look trained by years of dealing with broken men and impulsive women. You're in the 60-day return window, he said, punching numbers into his computer. We can do a full refund. I smiled like a man watching Karma clock in for her shift. 10 minutes later, I walked out $11,000 richer and emotionally lighter than a helium balloon. I swear, as I stepped into the parking lot, I heard the faint sound of Beyoncé singing Irreplaceable. It might have been a passing car, or the universe applauding. Next on my to-do list, Lily's car. Her precious white Audi that she couldn't stop bragging about. Technically, it was leased in both our names, because I, in my infinite stupidity, had co-signed. She loved saying, "It's our car," which, in hindsight, was her way of saying, "You're paying for it." Not anymore. I called the leasing company and put on my nicest, most customer service voice meets menace tone. "Hi, I need to remove my name from a co-signed vehicle. The other driver's now independently mobile." They processed it faster than expected. Turns out, when the guy making the payments backs out, they suddenly care a lot about who's on the paperwork. By 10 a.m., her Audi was no longer my problem. Her personal assistant's salary couldn't cover those payments. I almost felt bad for about 45 seconds. Then I remembered her words. "I'm moving in with my boss, Jamie." Sympathy deleted. Next came the fun part. The digital purge. Wi-Fi? Password changed. Netflix? Revoked. Disney Plus? Gone. Prime Video? Expired faster than her loyalty. Even the Spotify family plan? Revoked. Sorry, family revoked too. My thumbs were moving like I was in a video game called Emotional Detachment Simulator 3000. Every click was therapy. Every password successfully changed felt like a fresh exorcism. I even renamed the Wi-Fi network from Lovinus24 to Single and Secure. Petty? Maybe. Fulfilling? Absolutely. Then I logged into the joint grocery delivery account and removed her favorites. No more oat milk, kale chips, or that overpriced lavender cleaning spray that made the apartment smell like regret. I replaced them with steak, whiskey, and peanut butter. You know, the holy trinity of post-breakup essentials. But why stop there? Her gym membership, canceled. Her access to my Amazon Prime, gone. I even remembered she used my Apple ID to back up her photos once. I removed her faster than the FBI deletes files labeled classified. By 3 p.m., I'd achieved something most therapists can't promise in 6 months: closure. Every digital door that once connected her to my life had been locked tighter than Fort Knox on a federal holiday. I sat back on my couch, took a long sip of coffee, and admired the quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't need music. You could feel the peace vibrating through the air. Around 4:30, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but I already knew who it was. There's a sixth sense that kicks in after a breakup. I bet that's my ex realizing actions have consequences sense. By 5 p.m., I was fully reclined, watching reruns of The Office on my own subscription, when it hit me. Somewhere out there, Lily was discovering her life no longer worked without me. The Wi-Fi didn't connect. Netflix asked for a password. Disney Plus refused to remember this device. Her Spotify logged her out mid-therapy playlist. And the gym probably told her, "Your membership has been canceled by the primary account holder." It was the perfect symphony of chaos, and I was the conductor. Just then, Mason called. "Bro, tell me you're not doing something stupid." I grinned. "Define stupid." He groaned. "You're the type of guy who cleans his emotional wounds with sarcasm and caffeine." "Incorrect," I said. "I clean them with refunds and revoked privileges." He laughed. "You're dangerous when you're calm." "What's next?" "Operation Reset," I said. "Phase 1 complete, retrieval of assets. Phase 2, reclaim peace." "Phase 3, he asked. "Phase 3 is classified." Translation, he said, "You're gonna post a subtle revenge story on Instagram." "Maybe," I said, smirking. Caption, "New Wi-Fi, who dis?" He nearly choked laughing. After hanging up, I looked around the apartment. It felt bigger, lighter, like I'd finally vacuumed emotional clutter out of my life. Her stuff was still in the corner, 2 boxes labeled summer clothes and miscellaneous, which I now realized meant stuff I don't care enough about to pack. I debated tossing it out the window, but settled for a more civilized approach. I taped a note on one of the boxes. "Pickup window expires in 7 days. After that, items will be considered abandoned property and donated to people who still value loyalty." Then I cracked open a beer, put my feet up, and let out the kind of sigh that could end wars. The relief was real. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was performing emotional CPR on a dying relationship. Funny thing is, people always say closure comes from talking things through. Nah, closure comes from changing your passwords and seeing the unauthorized login attempt notification pop up on your phone. That's closure. That's peace with a Wi-Fi signal. My phone buzzed again, same unknown number. I ignored it. 2 minutes later, a text came through. "Oliver, it's me. Please pick up." I took another sip of beer, smiled, and whispered, "Ah, there it is. The regret phase. The part of the movie where the villain realizes they're not the main character after all." I muted the phone and went back to the office. Fitting, really. Watching Michael Scott scream, I declare bankruptcy, while I silently declared emotional freedom. Somewhere around episode 3, my email pinged with a notification from the bank. Joint account activity alert. I opened it. She tried to transfer $800 to her personal card. Cute. I clicked cancel transaction so fast I might have broken the internet. Then I transferred the remaining balance to my new solo account, named it Freedom Fund, and deleted her name entirely. If love is blind, money should at least have 20/20th vision. By early evening, Operation Reset was in full swing. Emotionally, stabilized. Financially, fortified. Digitally, firewall secured. At 5 p.m. sharp, I sat on my couch again. Same couch where we used to argue about TV shows, wedding venues, and whether I took her ambition seriously. Now it was just me, the couch, and my upgraded sense of humor. My TV reflected my own smirk as I whispered, "You moved in with your boss, huh?" Hope the benefits package includes emotional support. For a while, I just sat there, watching the sunlight fade across the walls, thinking about how endings are rarely dramatic. They're just quiet, like flipping a switch off. The world keeps turning, but you're suddenly lighter, less cluttered. And honestly, it felt good to take control, to do something instead of wallowing. Because heartbreak? It feeds on helplessness. The second you act, change a password, get a refund, cancel a membership, you start starving it. Around 7 p.m., my stomach reminded me that revenge doesn't cook dinner. I ordered takeout, Chinese, extra spicy, because apparently, I enjoy pain with flavor. When the delivery guy showed up, he said, "Big night in." I grinned. "Nah, big night of moving on." He raised an eyebrow like, "I've delivered to enough heartbroken people to recognize that tone," and handed me the bag. "Good luck, bro. Hope she's watching from somewhere." I smirked. "Oh, trust me, she'll notice when Netflix asks her to sign up again." Dinner tasted like victory and chili oil. As I ate, I made one final decision. I wasn't going to play the victim. Lily might have rewritten her love story mid-sentence, but I was taking the pen back. My story wasn't over. It just got a plot twist. By 9 p.m., I was stretched out on the couch, full belly, full peace, and not a single regret. My phone was silent, my conscience cleaner than my inbox, and my mental hard drive freshly formatted. 6:30 p.m. ding-dong. Now, under normal circumstances, the sound of a doorbell means pizza, a delivery, or Jehovah's Witnesses with perfect timing. But when your ex-fiancée recently left you for her boss and then got locked out of your streaming accounts, it usually means something worse. I looked at the doorbell camera feed on my phone, and there she was, Lily, standing on my porch like a Hallmark movie reject. Waterproof mascara had clearly failed the quality assurance test, and she was holding 2 suitcases and the kind of regret that could fuel an entire therapy convention. I leaned back on the couch, sipped my beer, and whispered, well, if it isn't the CEO of Poor Decisions Incorporated. For a solid minute, I debated pretending I wasn't home. But curiosity won, because if karma ever hand-delivers entertainment to your doorstep, you open the curtain and enjoy the show. I walked to the door but kept the chain lock on, because I wasn't about to get ambushed by nostalgia or guilt, or worse, her perfume. "Jamie kicked me out," she sobbed. Her voice cracked like a sad violin played by an amateur. "He said he needs time to process everything." "Already?" I said, raising an eyebrow. Wow, the man moves fast. I guess promotions at that company have a probation period too. Her eyes darted around, embarrassed, angry, desperate. All the stages of regret in under 10 seconds. "It's complicated," she sniffled. He said he's confused. He's married, Oliver. I didn't know until yesterday. Translation, he's trying to save his own ass. "Ah," I said, nodding like a therapist who's just diagnosed stupidity. "So, what you're saying is, he needs time to explain to his wife why he suddenly has a pregnant intern living in his guest room." She flinched. "That's not fair. Neither is life, Lily. But it's honest." Her face scrunched up like she was about to unleash a guilt trip, but I was already 5 steps ahead. "You can't just cut me off like this," she said, clutching her belly for dramatic effect, like she thought the pregnancy card was the ultimate cheat code. I folded my arms. "You moved in with your boss, pregnant with his baby, and told me about it during business hours. I'm just respecting your new LinkedIn life choice. You chose corporate housing, remember? Just for tonight," she pleaded. "Please, Oliver. I have nowhere else to go." I leaned slightly forward, keeping the chain tight. "Sorry, occupancy's full. Try the HR department. Maybe they can do an employee wellness check." Her expression twisted into disbelief. "You're heartless." "No," I said. "I just learned boundaries." I closed the door gently, letting the chain rattle for emphasis. She banged on it, shouting my name like I was some kind of rom-com hero about to chase her through the rain. But this wasn't a Nicholas Sparks movie. This was real life, and my popcorn was getting cold. I turned up the volume on my TV. The sound of the Office theme song drowned out her crying. Honestly, it was beautiful, like a meditation app that finally worked. She eventually stopped knocking. The camera showed her sitting on the porch steps, mascara streaked and scrolling her phone, probably texting every person in her contacts list for a backup couch. I imagined the message. "Need a place to stay, temporarily homeless but emotionally available." About an hour later, she left. The headlights of an Uber lit up the driveway, and she dragged her suitcases away, head low. The universe gave me a parting gift, the soft thud of her heel breaking as she stumbled onto the curb. I raised my beer. Cheers to gravity and karma. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, like someone had vacuumed the emotional dust out of my life. I brewed coffee, opened the blinds, and there it was again, silence. The kind that felt earned. But peace, my friend, never lasts long when drama knows your address. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. New text, unknown number. I didn't even have to open it to know. Please, I made a mistake. Jamie lied about everything. I can't afford this motel. There it was. The Desperation Trilogy. I screenshotted them all and put them in a folder titled Future Comedy Material. Maybe one day, I'd read them during my best man speech at someone else's wedding, obviously. By noon, my phone was vibrating like a blender. She was borrowing phones now, friends, co-workers, probably her sister. The messages ranged from manipulative to pathetic. Then her sister Zoe called my work line. My work line. The audacity. I answered, voice professional. Oliver Bennett speaking. Don't act formal with me, she snapped. Lily told me everything. You're heartless. She's pregnant and homeless. I leaned back in my chair. Homeless? She moved out voluntarily. That's called remote work. You're unbelievable, she said. She's carrying a child. Yeah, and she's also carrying the consequences of her decisions. Big difference. Click. End of conversation. 5 minutes later, her mom called. Because of course she did. Oliver, how could you throw a pregnant woman out on the street? I sighed. Elaine, she threw herself out. I just changed the locks. You should be ashamed of yourself, she shouted. Trust me, I was. For about 5 years. Then she moved in with her boss and cured me. She gasped so dramatically I thought she might pass out. I ended the call before she started quoting scripture. By lunchtime, my coworkers were whispering. You can always tell when gossip starts circulating. The break room goes quiet when you walk in, and people suddenly discover the fascinating art of stirring coffee in silence. I heard snippets, heartless, sociopath, emotional detachment. I smiled. People say those things like they're insults, but I call it mental cybersecurity. You learn to firewall your feelings after enough malware disguised as love tries to log in. That evening, I met up with Mason for drinks. He'd been dying to hear the sequel. So, let me get this straight, he said between sips. She cheated, got pregnant, moved in with her boss, got kicked out, and now she's trying to move back in with you? Correct, I said, nodding. Apparently, my house is now her backup server. He whistled. Damn, that's bold. I wouldn't even have the confidence to ask my ex for Wi-Fi, let alone housing. She's got gall, I'll give her that. He leaned in. You gonna cave? I gave him a look that could have frozen lava. Mason, I changed the locks. I revoked her Prime account. I'm this close to calling NASA to remove her from the planet. He laughed so hard the bartender looked over. You're evil, bro. Evil? Nah, just organized. When I got home that night, I checked my doorbell camera again out of habit. No crying ex, no emotional blackmail, just peace. Beautiful, uneventful peace. I poured a drink, sat back, and thought about how quickly tables can turn. 1 week ago, she was choosing champagne flutes for our wedding registry. Now she was probably Googling cheap extended stay motels with breakfast. The poetic symmetry almost made me emotional. Almost. I'll be honest, though, there was a weird satisfaction in knowing I didn't break down, didn't beg, didn't turn into the cliché guy sending 3 a.m. I miss you texts. I handled it with grace and sarcasm, the two greatest weapons of the emotionally evolved. Still, there's something wild about how fast a relationship can implode. You think you know someone, and then one day they're standing on your porch crying, and you realize the person you loved might have just been a really convincing improv actor. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, same one I'd stared at during the call. Only now it wasn't spinning regret, it was circulating relief. I thought about what she'd said on the phone that day. You're not going to fight for me? And I laughed. Because that's what she never understood. I don't fight for people who walk themselves out of my life. I'm not a warrior. I'm a man with decent Wi-Fi and boundaries. By midnight, I was out cold, sleeping deeper than I had in months. No overthinking, no checking my phone, no wondering if I'd done enough. I'd done plenty. The universe was finally on Do Not Disturb. And as for Lily, She was probably discovering that the grass isn't greener. It's just more expensive and comes with a boss named Jamie. The next morning, I woke up refreshed, made breakfast, and thought, if peace had a flavor, it'd taste like bacon and justice. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's locking the door, changing the Wi-Fi password, and letting the crying intern learn what happens when you underestimate the quiet guy who keeps receipts. The next morning started like most of my post-breakup mornings. Coffee strong enough to strip paint, quiet apartment, and a vague sense that peace was finally legal again. That was until my phone started buzzing like it had a personal vendetta. I thought maybe my Amazon delivery was early or my boss was pretending to care about productivity again. But no, it was messages, lots of them. Random numbers. Unfamiliar area codes. Clearly, Lily was borrowing phones like a college freshman borrows Wi-Fi. I opened one text. Please, I made a mistake. Then another. Jamie lied about everything. A third one sealed it. I can't afford this motel. I swear, you could almost smell the desperation through the screen. I stared at the text like a scientist studying a new species of audacity. No replies, of course. I took screenshots, neatly labeled, and saved in a folder titled Future Comedy Material. I had plans for these. Maybe I'd frame them. Maybe I'd read them aloud at my next poker night. Gentlemen, tonight's entertainment. Exhibit A, The Chronicles of a Clueless Fiancé. By 10 a.m., she'd escalated to voice calls. Unknown numbers again. I didn't answer. I wasn't about to get sucked into some emotional TED talk about forgiveness. But just when I thought she'd finally run out of prepaid phone minutes, my work phone rang. My work phone. I picked it up, and before I could even say hello, I heard the voice, her sister Zoe, sounding like she'd been waiting her whole life for this confrontation. You're heartless, she snapped. Lily's pregnant and homeless. I nearly choked on my coffee. Homeless. I repeated, feigning shock. I thought she moved out voluntarily. Isn't that called remote work now? There was a stunned silence. You think this is funny? She hissed. No, I said calmly. I think it's called consequences. Click. End of call. I sat there, grinning like a man who just won an argument with gravity. Not 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Lily's mom. Of course. Because every bad sitcom needs a meddling mother-in-law figure. Oliver, how could you? She began, her voice trembling with righteous fury. You threw a pregnant woman into the streets. I sighed dramatically, swirling my coffee like a villain in a soap opera. Elaine, I said, let's be accurate. She threw herself into the streets. I just changed the locks. She made a mistake, she cried. We all do. Right, I said. But some of us don't call our exes about it after. She gasped so loudly I thought she'd inhaled her pearls. I ended the call before she started quoting Bible verses about mercy. I'm not saying I'm allergic to guilt trips, but I'd rather sit in rush hour traffic listening to an MLM pitch. By lunch, I could tell my coworkers knew something was up. The break room felt quieter. The kind of quiet where everyone's pretending not to eavesdrop. I grabbed my sandwich, nodded at a few people, and overheard the whisper. He's so calm. It's creepy. Another voice whispered. I heard she's pregnant, and he kicked her out. I wanted to turn around and say, correction. She left me for her boss, and I revoked her Hulu, but I figured that might not go over well during an HR audit. Let them talk. I call it mental cybersecurity. Protecting your peace like a firewall protects your data. You can't hack a man who's emotionally encrypted. That evening, my friend Mason called. Dude, he said, your ex's sister just tagged you in a Facebook rant. I rolled my eyes. Oh God, what's the headline? It's a long one, he said, laughing. Something like, heartless fiancé abandons pregnant woman after cheating boss disappears. Bro, the comments section is a war zone. I opened Facebook. Sure enough, there it was, a dramatic post complete with a crying emoji and a blurry photo of Lily looking like a contestant on The Bachelor, Pity Edition. People were commenting things like, men are trash, and prayers for her and the baby. I almost replied, prayers accepted, for my Wi-Fi password she lost. Instead, I just screenshotted it and added it to my collection. Exhibit B. Around 7 p.m., I got another call, this time from an unknown local number. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. A few minutes later, the notification popped up. I pressed play, and Lily's voice filled the room. Oliver, she began, trying to sound calm, but landing somewhere between desperate and dramatic. I know you're mad, But please, I just need help. I don't have anyone else to call. I paused it halfway through to grab popcorn. When she said, "You were always so kind," I muttered, "Yeah, and you were always so employed. What changed?" Then she added, "I just need you to remember the man you were when you proposed." I almost laughed out loud. The man I said to my TV, wasn't paying for a boss's baby shower, sweetheart. By 8 p.m., my group chat was lighting up. Mason, my buddy Ryan, and even my cousin were sending screenshots of Lily's family drama spreading online. "Bro, she's really running a PR campaign," Ryan texted. "You're the villain in her story now." I typed back, "Good. Every good story needs one." Mason replied with a gif of Thanos snapping his fingers. Accurate. Later that night, I sat outside on my porch, drink in hand, staring at the quiet street. The neighborhood cat strolled across my driveway like it owned the place, which, frankly, it probably did. I took a long sip and said to no one. You'd think cheating would come with a silence clause. Because here's the thing. People love to rewrite history, especially the ones who set it on fire. They always try to make you the arsonist. And the more you stay calm, the crazier they look. I was counting on that. The next day, my phone rang again. Work number, same tone of doom. "Mr. Bennett?" a voice asked. "This is HR. Do you have a minute?" "Oh, fantastic." My favorite words. Turns out, Lily had emailed my company. Apparently, she was claiming emotional abuse and financial abandonment. The HR rep sounded cautious, like she was handling uranium. "We just want to ensure everything is okay." I smiled through the phone. "Everything's great. My only crime is canceling a joint Netflix account." There was a pause. "Oh," she said, caught off guard. We just needed to check." "Totally understand," I said. "Would you like me to forward screenshots of her texts for context?" "No, that won't be necessary." Call ended. HR knew nonsense when they heard it. I imagine her typing "case closed, dramatic X" in the report. That evening, Mason came over with pizza and a six-pack. "You're handling this too well," he said. "Most guys would have set something on fire by now." I shrugged. "Oh, don't worry. I'm setting things on fire. Just not the legal kind." We clinked bottles, and he said, "You think she's done?" I laughed. "She's only on episode 2 of her redemption arc." Sure enough, right as he left, my phone buzzed again. Another text, another unknown number. "Oliver, please. Just talk to me. Jamie's ghosting me." I don't even know what to do. I typed out a reply, stared at it, then deleted it. The reply said, "You could start by talking to HR. Yours, not mine." Instead, I turned off my phone, leaned back, and let out a deep exhale. There's something oddly satisfying about not replying. It's like resisting the urge to scratch a mosquito bite. Uncomfortable at first, but deeply rewarding when you realize the itch can't control you. I went to bed that night thinking about how I'd spent years trying to be her hero, her support system, her backup plan. And now, I was just a chapter in her cautionary tale. But guess what? I was fine with that. Because while she was playing the victim on Facebook, I was living rent-free in her head, and she wasn't in mine anymore. The next morning, I woke up to one final masterpiece, a group text. I don't know how she did it, but she managed to create a chat that included me, her sister, her mom, and a couple of mutual friends. The message said, "Can we all be adults and talk this out?" I nearly spit out my coffee. Talk this out? Like we were a college project team? No, thank you. I hit leave conversation faster than a cat dodging a bath. Seconds later, Zoe texted me separately. "You're so immature." I smiled and replied, "No, I'm just unavailable for bad management." Then I blocked her. And just like that, my morning was peaceful again. I looked around my apartment, the one I now fully owned emotionally and physically, and realized something. I'd finally reached the point where her chaos was nothing more than background noise. The calls, the messages, the online pity campaign, none of it mattered. Because at the end of the day, when you stop feeding drama, it starves itself. By 5 p.m., I poured myself a drink, sank into my couch, and raised a silent toast to the calm. The calls had stopped. The group texts had failed. Even the internet had moved on. And somewhere out there, Lily was probably learning the hardest lesson of all. That some bridges don't burn because someone set them on fire. They just collapse under the weight of their own lies. 2 days after the group text fiasco, I was in the middle of what normal people call moving on, which for me meant reorganizing my spice rack and pretending that alphabetizing paprika and pepper somehow counted as self-care. The phone buzzed. It was Mason. When a friend calls at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, it's either bad news or a multi-level marketing pitch. "Bro," he said, sounding like a man who'd just discovered buried treasure. "You sitting down?" I dropped the paprika. "I'm in my kitchen, not the stock market." "What's up?" He paused for dramatic effect. "Jamie's married." I blinked. "Come again." "Married. Wife, house in the suburbs, 2 kids, golden retriever. The whole Pinterest board." For a solid 5 seconds I said nothing. Then I laughed. That slow, uncontrollable laugh that starts in your chest and ends in your soul. "You're telling me the man who convinced my fiancée to run off and start a family already had one?" "Yup," Mason said. "Apparently, his wife found out about Lily. It's all over the office group chat. HR's having a meltdown." I nearly spilled my coffee. "Oh, this is better than Netflix. Let me paint the picture." Jamie, the guy with the no-sock loafers and the leadership guru haircut, had been playing double life bingo. Wife at home, mistress in middle management, baby on the way, and company assets funding both lifestyles. He really thought he was invincible. Newsflash, Karma has a LinkedIn account too. I opened my laptop, because obviously I had to confirm this masterpiece myself. A quick scroll through LinkedIn and boom, Jamie's profile had gone from dynamic team leader passionate about growth to currently seeking new opportunities. Translation, fired. His photo was gone, banner removed, endorsements vanished like witnesses in a mob movie. Corporate witness protection. Mason was still talking, feeding me details like a gossip podcast host. Apparently, his wife showed up at the office yesterday. Full-blown soap opera scene. She found out through his credit card statements. There were hotel charges, baby store purchases, and an Amazon order for prenatal vitamins. I whistled. Damn. Caught by capitalism. Exactly, he said. And get this, she confronted him during the staff meeting. I almost fell out of my chair. In the meeting? Yup. She walked in with the receipts, literally, in a manila folder. Said, if you can explain this, I'll sit down. He couldn't. HR escorted him out 5 minutes later. I leaned back, savoring every syllable. So, Lily left me for a man who left his wife for her, only for him to get left by his wife and his job in the same hour. That's the chain of command, my friend, Mason said. Natural selection. After we hung up, I just sat there in the quiet, grinning at the irony. Life has a wicked sense of humor when you stop interrupting it. I imagined Lily in a cheap motel somewhere, scrolling through her phone, realizing the man she risked everything for couldn't even risk a divorce. Somewhere out there, she was learning that promotion came with no benefits, no dental, and definitely no 401k. By noon, the gossip had made its way to my phone through mutual friends. Bro, you hear about Jamie? Did you know Lily's ex works there too? This is wild. I just replied with the same 2 words every time. Karma delivers. I decided to treat myself. Drove to my favorite diner, ordered a bacon cheeseburger with extra fries, and toasted to poetic justice with a root beer float. The waitress, Sandy, looked at me and said, "You look like a man who just got good news." I smiled. Let's just say, the universe finally clocked in for overtime. She winked. Well, cheers to that, hon. While I ate, I scrolled through my phone again, half expecting another wave of frantic texts from Lily. Sure enough, there it was. A new number. Oliver, please call me. Everything's falling apart. I stared at it, dipped a fry in ketchup, and whispered, "Everything already fell apart, sweetheart. You just showed up late to the collapse." I didn't reply. Some lessons you let life teach for you. By the time I got home, the group chat was exploding again. Ryan had sent screenshots from an anonymous Reddit post. Someone claiming to be an employee at Jamie's company had written a full expose. Our department head got caught cheating with his assistant. Wife found out, HR's in chaos, and the intern from hell is crying in the parking lot. The comments were ruthless. This sounds like an HR nightmare. Girl, get a lawyer. Plot twist. She's pregnant. One commenter wrote, bet the fiancé she left is living his best life. I couldn't resist. I made an account and upvoted it. That evening, Mason came over again with a 6-pack, because apparently our friendship now ran on schadenfreude and beer. So what's the next move? He asked. Move. I said, there is no move. The game's already over. I won without playing. He laughed. You're handling this like a Bond villain. Nah, I said. More like a retired superhero who doesn't come out of retirement unless it's tax deductible. We sat there on the balcony, watching the sunset, trading jokes about karma's impeccable timing. Mason said, "You think she'll try to come back again?" I shrugged. Probably. But if she does, she'll find out my heart's under new management. Damn, he said. You rehearsed that line, didn't you? Since the jewelry refund cleared. Later that night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard the faint ping of another message. I glanced at the phone. Another unknown number. I sighed, unlocked it, and read, "Jamie won't talk to me. His wife called me a home-wrecking gold digger. I don't know what to do." I wiped my mouth, stared at the screen, and said out loud, "You could start by taking accountability. But that's probably not in your skill set." Then I deleted it. Not blocked, deleted. Blocking would have been an acknowledgement. Deleting was indifference. The next day, I woke up feeling like I'd slept through a thunderstorm and woken up in clear weather. It's funny how fast peace returns when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. At work, HR was gossip-proofing like crazy, official memos about professional boundaries and office relationships. My boss, Greg, called me into his office. "Hey man," he said, closing the door. "I just wanted to check in. I heard about you know." I smiled. "You mean the corporate soap opera starring my ex and her boss?" He chuckled awkwardly. "Yeah, that. You holding up okay?" "Never better," I said. "Turns out betrayal is great for productivity." I finished 3 reports before 10 a.m. Greg nodded. "Good attitude. For what it's worth, everyone's on your side." "Appreciate it," I said. "Tell them I accept sympathy in the form of paid leave." He laughed. "Get back to work, Bennett." By the end of the day, I had a dozen unread texts, most of them from unknown numbers that I assumed were Lily's new burner phones. The final one made me snort aloud. "I made a mistake leaving you. Jamie ruined everything. I just wish you'd talk to me." I typed a reply just to get it out of my system. "Talk to you about what? The weather? The thunderstorm of your own making." Then I deleted it again. Silence was the only language I wanted to speak. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and scrolled through old photos one last time. Not to reminisce, just to delete. Each swipe was like clearing browser history on a bad life decision. Our vacation in Miami? Gone. Her birthday dinner? Gone. The selfie we took outside the jewelry store? Double gone. By the end, my gallery looked like a man who'd never heard of Lily in his life. That's when I realized I didn't hate her. Hate takes energy. I was just done. Emotionally logged out. Sometime around midnight, Mason texted me again. "Just saw a post. Jamie's wife filed for divorce and is suing him for misuse of company funds." I grinned. "So the sequel's better than the original." "Dude," he said, "you need to write a book about this." "Already living it," I replied. Working title: The Promotion She Didn't Deserve. Before bed, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, Lily was probably crying in a motel room, realizing her boss wasn't her happily ever after, but her exit interview from Common Sense. And for the first time since that infamous phone call, I felt completely free. Not angry, not bitter, just untethered. It's weird, the moment you stop wanting closure. You realize it's not something they give you. It's something you give yourself when you stop replaying the scene. She'd made her choices, and life was cashing those checks with interest. I finished my drink, raised the glass to the window, and said softly, "To Jamie's wife, may her lawyer be ruthless." Then I laughed, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds, the smell of fresh coffee, and the distinct feeling that the worst part of my life had quietly packed up and moved out. My phone buzzed one more time, a final text from Lily. "I just wish things could go back to how they were." I stared at it, smiled, and typed one last message before deleting her number for good. They did, for me. A week after the whole Jamie's married revelation, I was back to what I now called post-chaos normal. My mornings were quiet again. My coffee maker didn't sound like it was competing with someone's hairdryer, and my living room didn't smell like Sephora exploded. Life was finally stable, which, of course, meant the universe was about to test that. It happened on a Tuesday, because bad news never respects weekends. I got to work early, ready to impress my boss by existing, when I saw a plain white envelope sitting on my desk. No postage. Just my name written in handwriting that looked like cursive met caffeine withdrawal. I flipped it over, and there it was, certified mail. Now, I don't know if you've ever received a certified letter at work, but it's basically the adult version of "we need to talk." Nothing good ever comes in one. Either you're being sued, audited, or, in my case, haunted by your ex with access to a post office. I tore it open, expecting divorce papers I didn't need, or maybe a bill for emotional damages. Instead, it was 3 handwritten pages, soap opera penmanship, hearts over the I's, dramatic loops on the Y's. I didn't even need to read the signature. I could smell the regret through the ink. "Oliver," it began, "I never meant for things to happen this way. You abandoned me in my time of need." That line almost made me spit out my coffee. I abandoned her. "Ma'am, you moved out with a duffel bag and a boss who already had a wife." I kept reading because sometimes stupidity deserves an audience. "Please pay for my hotel until I get back on my feet. We should go to couples therapy to heal this betrayal." This betrayal. Not her betrayal, mine. I had to reread that part just to make sure my brain wasn't experiencing lag. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or frame the letter as a piece of performance art. It was like reading a script written by someone who'd slept through reality. I walked straight to the break room where my friend Ryan, our office's resident lawyer/sarcasm supplier, was pouring coffee. I slid the letter toward him like it was evidence in a criminal trial. "Read this," I said. He started reading. His face changed expressions faster than a malfunctioning emoji keyboard. By paragraph 2, he was wheezing. "Oh my God," he said between laughs. "If I die laughing, you can sue her for emotional distress." "Is this not insanity?" I asked. Ryan held up a hand, still chuckling. "This is gold, man. You don't respond to this, you archive it. One day Netflix will call, and you'll need this for the writer's room." We kept the letter. I folded it neatly, put it in a folder labeled "Evidence for the Biopic," and slipped it into my desk drawer. Because honestly, who knows? Maybe one day I'll sell the movie rights. The promotion she didn't expect, based on poor life choices. The rest of the day went by uneventfully, except for the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about how someone could twist reality so hard it snapped. I mean, she really believed I owed her something. As if heartbreak came with alimony. Around 6 p.m., I got home, dropped my keys on the counter, and saw another letter slipped under my door. Not certified this time, but the handwriting was the same. "Round 2. I muttered, tearing it open. "Oliver," it began again. Apparently, introspection wasn't her strong suit. "I forgive you for how you treated me." Forgive me. This woman had the nerve to turn my peace into a confessional. "I know you acted out of pain. I still believe we're meant to be. God has a plan for us." I stared at the paper. God might have a plan, but I was pretty sure it didn't involve me Venmoing her hotel bill. Halfway through, she mentioned how lonely she was and how this baby deserves a father figure with integrity. That one almost made me snort my drink. Integrity? Lady, you cheated with your married boss. I'm not the integrity fairy. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Ryan and Mason with one caption: "The sequel no one asked for." Mason replied, "Tell her to send it by FedEx next time so it feels more official." Ryan sent back, "Frame it. Title it, Certified Delusion." By the next day, it wasn't just letters. It was voicemails. Long ones. Emotional ones. Some started with crying, some ended with accusations. One of them went, "Oliver, I saw your car at the diner. Were you with someone?" I was a cheeseburger, but I didn't think that counted as infidelity. She left 7 messages in 2 days, each progressively more dramatic than the last. I started rating them like podcasts. Episode 1, The Lonely Hotel. 3 stars, solid emotional delivery, lacks self-awareness. Episode 2, The Father of Integrity. 2 stars, repetitive plot. Episode 3, The Universe is Testing Me. 1 star, weak ending, too much crying. By the time episode 7 dropped, I was considering charging a subscription fee. At lunch on Thursday, Ryan and I were at our favorite spot downtown, the kind of place that serves burgers big enough to solve emotional problems. I told him about the voicemails, and he shook his head. "You know what this is?" he said. "Classic deflection. She's rewriting the narrative because she can't handle being the villain." "Then she should have picked a different genre," I said. "I'm not signing up for a redemption arc." He laughed. "Man, you should start a podcast, Letters from My Ex, a cautionary tale." Season 1 sponsored by Common Sense, I said. which she clearly ran out of. When I got home that night, there was a third letter waiting. No envelope this time, just folded and tucked into my mailbox like a teenage breakup note. I opened it, bracing myself. Oliver, I saw your friend Mason's post. Are you mocking me online? I laughed so hard I almost dropped it. Mason had posted a meme earlier that said, when your ex leaves you for her boss, but ends up jobless and homeless. That's not heartbreak, that's a plot twist. I guess subtlety wasn't our strong suit. The letter went on for 2 pages about public humiliation and privacy violations. Then it ended with, if you have any decency left, help me get through this pregnancy. I folded it neatly and muttered, I have decency, just not amnesia. The next morning, I stopped by the post office on my way to work. The clerk looked bored, probably thinking I was mailing bills or tax forms. Nope. I handed him a plain envelope addressed to Lily's motel. Inside, one note, return to sender. Sincerely, Common Sense. For the rest of the week, I didn't hear from her. It was weird, like the calm after a hurricane, where you're not sure if it's really over or if the storm's just reloading. But on Saturday morning, another certified letter showed up. Apparently, she'd found a bulk discount on emotional postage. This one was shorter and even more dramatic. I'm leaving town, she wrote. You'll never hear from me again. You win. I smiled, sipped my coffee, and whispered, finally, a victory speech. But of course, the last line killed the vibe. Unless you want to talk before I go. Of course she had to add that. Drama never exits quietly. It always leaves the door cracked open. I didn't respond. Didn't call. Didn't text. I just went about my weekend like a man who'd passed a difficult exam. I even went grocery shopping, something I'd avoided because that store was full of Lily's ghosts. But this time, it was different. No sadness. No nostalgia. Just me, buying steak, beer, and freedom. Sunday afternoon, Mason and Ryan came over to watch the game. Mason spotted the stack of letters on my counter and said, damn, bro, she's building a paper trail. Yeah, I said. A trail straight to irrelevance. Ryan picked one up, reading aloud dramatically. We should go to therapy to heal this betrayal, he laughed. Man, if this were a movie, the audience would boo her. Exactly, I said. This isn't therapy. It's public relations. Mason cracked open a beer. So, what are you going to do with all of them? Keep them, I said. Proof that I survived the human equivalent of a pop-up ad. They both laughed, and for a moment, the air in my apartment felt lighter than it had in months. I realized that while she was writing chapters of regret, I was writing a new story, one with peace, beer, and people who actually understood boundaries. When they left that night, I stood by my window, watching the streetlights flicker against the quiet neighborhood. Somewhere out there, Lily was still writing letters, still spinning her version of events. But it didn't matter, because I wasn't her audience anymore. I raised my glass one last time and said softly, certified received, drama returned to sender. And with that, I finally, officially, closed the chapter. Wednesday evening began innocently enough. I'd just finished microwaving leftover Chinese food that had definitely seen better days and was halfway through an episode of Better Call Saul when my doorbell rang. At first, I assumed it was a delivery. Maybe Mason had finally ordered that dumb, congratulations on your emotional maturity cake he'd been threatening to send me. But when I glanced at the doorbell camera, the universe rewarded me with an encore performance from my favorite recurring sitcom characters, Lily's parents, Martin and Elaine, aka the ghosts of poor decisions past. I froze, chopsticks midair. They looked exactly how I remembered. Martin in his ever-present golf sweater even though it was 75 degrees, and Elaine wearing pearls big enough to pick up satellite signals. The two of them stood on my porch like Jehovah's Witnesses for guilt. I muttered, oh God, they've come to reclaim the warranty on their defective daughter. I opened the door a cautious 3 inches, enough to establish dominance, but not enough for them to wedge in emotionally. Martin smiled that awkward, trying to be reasonable smile. Oliver, can we come in for a moment? I gave him the look of a man evaluating whether forgiveness was tax deductible. Depends. Is this a social call or an intervention? Elaine answered for him, voice trembling like she'd practiced this monologue in the car. Oliver, she's pregnant. She's scared. She has nowhere to go. I sighed theatrically. Elaine, she's pregnant and employed. Scared maybe. Homeless, no? That's a personal budget issue. Martin stepped forward, hands raised like a hostage negotiator. Son, we're not here to start a fight. We just think you could show a little compassion. Compassion? I repeated, leaning on the doorframe. Martin, your daughter left me for her married boss and now wants me to fund her maternity leave. Compassion's in short supply this fiscal year. Elaine gasped like I'd just kicked a puppy. How dare you speak about the mother of your unborn child like that? I blinked. Whoa, let's stop right there, Broadway. That's not my unborn child. That's Jamie's unpaid internship. Her eyes went wide, and I swear if indignation were a sport, she'd have broken a record. You men are all the same, she hissed. Ma'am, I said calmly. Please don't lump me in with your son-in-law's boss's boyfriend. I'm just trying to watch Netflix. Martin sighed. Look, Oliver, we know mistakes were made. Plural. Yes, I interrupted. And one of them's still wearing waterproof mascara somewhere in a motel. Elaine stomped her heel. You think this is funny? Honestly, I said, scratching my chin. A little. Tragic comedy, really. Somewhere between Maury and Shark Tank. She turned to her husband, whispering, he's heartless. Martin, to his credit, still tried diplomacy. Oliver, maybe you two could talk it out. You had something good once. Martin, the only thing we had in common was a Wi-Fi plan and matching toothbrushes, both of which are canceled. Elaine crossed her arms. You'll regret this coldness one day. I smiled politely. Not as much as Lily regrets leaving me for a guy with a LinkedIn bio that starts with visionary. 30 minutes. That's how long they stayed. 30 full minutes of emotional spam. Pleading, scolding, guilt-tripping, looping back around to pleading again. I swear Elaine changed tactics like a telemarketer on commission. At one point, she even tried religion. What would Jesus do? She demanded. Probably not co-sign an Audi for adultery, I said. That one earned me a gasp loud enough to set off nearby car alarms. Martin tugged her arm. Let's go, honey. He's not ready. Translation, he's not buying what we're selling. When they finally retreated down the porch steps, I leaned against the doorway and raised my glass of water in salute. Cheers to boundaries, I said to the security camera. The camera blinked back, silently judging me, but I felt like I'd just defended the Alamo of personal peace. I went back inside, sat down, and realized my Chinese food was cold. Didn't even matter. The satisfaction was a meal in itself. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Text from Mason. Dude, saw a Facebook post from Lily's mom. You've officially been promoted to Devil Incarnate. I opened the link. Sure enough, Elaine had written a post that read like a Lifetime movie synopsis. My daughter's ex has turned his back on her in her time of need. Pregnant, abandoned, yet still strong. The comments section was pure chaos. Men these days have no hearts. Prayers for Lily. Stay strong, mama. I almost replied with, stay strong, just not in my living room. Instead, I screenshotted it from my growing digital scrapbook of delusion. Thursday morning at work, Ryan slid a coffee across my desk. Heard the in-laws made landfall. Yup, I said. They tried diplomacy. I countered with sarcasm. Successful mission? Complete. No casualties except maybe their faith in humanity. He laughed. You realize you're in the eye of a drama hurricane, right? Yeah, I said, sipping the coffee. But I built my house out of indifference. By noon, my phone started buzzing again. Not Lily this time, but mutual friends. Apparently, the parental pity tour had gone mobile. Elaine was calling anyone who'd ever liked one of our engagement photos. She's telling people you locked a pregnant woman out of your house, Ryan said, scrolling through his phone. I shrugged. Technically true. I locked a pregnant cheater out of my house. Context matters. He smirked. You ever think about going public? Set the record straight. No need, I said. The truth's like daylight. It shows up eventually. That night, though, I couldn't help imagining the dinner conversation at Casa Thompson. Elaine stirring her soup with righteous fury, Martin nodding like a hostage, Lily dabbing fake tears while scrolling through baby name apps for sympathy clicks. I could practically hear it. Mom, he won't even answer my calls. Sweetheart, men are weak. Dad, say something. Martin, pass the salt. The visual made me chuckle mid-beer. Friday evening, I came home from work to find a small box on my porch. No return address. For a moment, I thought, please tell me she didn't send me a baby announcement already. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a framed photo of Lily and me at our engagement shoot, smiling like two idiots who believed in happily ever after. The note taped to the back read, "Don't forget what you had." I stared at it for a good 10 seconds before tossing it straight into the recycling bin. "Already recycled," I said out loud. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from Martin. "Oliver, I just want to say, Elaine's a little emotional. We just want peace. Maybe when the baby's born, you'll feel differently." I hit replay just to make sure I'd heard that right. When the baby's born, you'll feel differently. That was rich. The only thing I'd feel differently about when that baby arrived was gratitude that diapers weren't my financial problem. Saturday morning, I decided to drive out to the farmer's market, cleanse the aura, buy overpriced honey, pretend I was thriving. While browsing tomatoes, I ran into someone who'd gone to church with Elaine. She gave me the pity look. "We're all praying for Lily," she said gently. "She's been through so much." I smiled. "Me too," I said. "Every night I pray she learns about accountability before her next relationship." The woman blinked, unsure whether I was serious, and walked away muttering something about bitterness. By Sunday, the phone calls finally stopped. Maybe they'd run out of emotional gas. Or maybe Martin had realized the futility of reasoning with a man who answered guilt trips with punchlines. I spent the afternoon cleaning, blasting music, and feeling a strange mix of peace and absurd amusement. That's when I saw it. One last text. From Elaine, of course. "I hope you can live with yourself." I typed back, "Oh, I sleep great. Thanks for checking." Then I hit send, blocked her number, and felt like I'd just deleted malware from my life. That evening, Mason swung by with 2 beers and his usual smirk. "So the in-laws paid a visit, huh?" "Yep. Full parade. Trumpets, banners, emotional guilt confetti." "How'd you handle it?" "Like a pro," I said. "Polite tone, clear boundaries, light sarcasm." He grinned. "That's your holy trinity." We clinked bottles, watched the game, and by halftime I realized something profound. The less I engaged with their drama, the smaller it got. Their narrative only thrived when I fed it energy, and I was officially on an emotional diet. Later, after Mason left, I stood by my window again, my unofficial therapy spot, and thought about how weirdly freeing it felt to say no. People act like refusing chaos makes you cruel, but honestly, it's the kindest thing you can do for yourself. Somewhere out there, Lily's parents were probably still rehearsing their speeches, blaming me for everything from climate change to their daughter's poor judgment. Let them. I'd learned something better than revenge: apathy with a good night's sleep. Before heading to bed, I poured a final drink, raised it toward the doorbell camera, and toasted quietly. To Martin and Elaine. May their next son-in-law come with a return policy. Then I took a sip, turned off the lights, and laughed softly to myself. Because that was the real victory. Not the silence, not the block numbers, not even the peace. The real victory was knowing I didn't need to explain my side anymore. The truth had already packed its bags and was marching proudly behind them in their little parade. Thursday morning dawned with that weird, glassy kind of sunlight that makes everything look cleaner than it is, like the world got power washed overnight by a very efficient angel with a hose. I woke up before my alarm, which either meant I was finally healing or my brain had decided sleep was for people who hadn't recently audited their relationships. Coffee, shower, fresh t-shirt, gym bag, boom. I was out the door with the confident stride of a man who'd changed all the passwords and slept like it. My gym isn't fancy, which is exactly why I love it. No eucalyptus towels, no influencer ring lights, no guy named Skylar selling powdered moon dust at the counter. Just iron, rubber, loud music, carpet that's seen things, and a front desk guy named Pete who looks like he could bench press a Ford Focus and then apologize for being in the way. I scanned in, shared the universal nod with the morning regulars, and headed to the rack for squats because nothing says therapy like putting your problems on a bar and standing up with them until your thighs file a complaint with HR. I had just finished my second set when I felt it. The change in air pressure that warns you a storm is building behind you. I re-racked the bar, turned, and there she was by the treadmills like a plot twist in overpriced leggings. Lily. Belly visible, ponytail too tight, eyes already shining with that watery film people use when they're about to ask for what they're not owed. The playlist switched songs right then, as if a DJ in heaven selected drama, extended mix. She approached like a diplomat crossing a demilitarized zone. "Oliver, just listen to me for 5 minutes," she said, breath hitching, volume calibrated to draw sympathy from distant cardio machines. I glanced at the clock above the mirrors, nodded once, and said, "You've got 3. Timer's running." A couple of dudes doing curls pretended not to eavesdrop with the focus of undercover agents. "I made a mistake," she said. "Jamie lied. He's married. He's a coward. He ghosted me. And I'm—" She gestured at her belly as if I might have missed the headline. "I'm trying to fix my life." "I believe you," I said and meant it. "I just don't believe on the fix." "You're cruel," she whispered, like an actress testing the microphone. "You changed the locks. You canceled everything. I felt like I didn't exist." "You do exist," I said. "Just not on my accounts." She flinched like the truth had sharp corners. "We shared a life. We shared a lease and a playlist," I said. "The life part requires honesty." Her jaw set. "So that's it. You're just going to lift weights and pretend none of this matters." "Not pretending," I said, grabbing my water bottle. I processed. "Now I'm squatting." She blinked at that, thrown off by the normalcy of it, like she expected violins, not chalk dust. "I'm scared," she said. "I don't have anywhere stable. My parents are unbearable. Jamie's wife threatened a restraining order if I text again. I keep waking up at 3 a.m. thinking I can't breathe." There it was. The tiny human truth under all the mess. For a moment, compassion flickered like a dashboard light. I wasn't made of stone. I was just done being used for heat. I lowered my voice. "I believe you're scared. I also believe you put yourself in the passenger seat of a car with no brakes because the driver promised great views." Her eyes watered. "I loved you. If that was love," I said gently, "then love needs a better training program." She studied my face for a long second, maybe searching for the boy who used to bring her coffee and fix her LinkedIn typos. "What happened to the guy who would have done anything for me?" "He learned the word no," I said. "Turns out it's a full sentence." Pete wandered by, offered a cautious, "Everything okay here?" like a bouncer at a poetry slam. I nodded. Lily sniffed, waved him away. "We're fine," she said, and Pete hovered just long enough to make it clear he'd be nearby if fine changed its mind. "Can you at least help me for a little while?" she asked. "Just until I'm stable. Pay the motel for 2 weeks. I'll figure the rest out." I wiped my hands on a towel and made myself say it plain, with no cleverness to hide behind. "No, Lily. I'm not your emergency fund. I'm not your backup husband. I'm not the guy you come back to when the music stops." She inhaled sharply. "I never thought you could be this cold." "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm done being warm to people who set fires." A trainer across the room yelled, "Drive through your heels," at a client, and the phrase echoed inside me. Heels. Yes. I rooted mine to the rubber floor. "You need to talk to HR," I added. "Yours, not mine. Talk to a lawyer. Make a plan. Get receipts. And stop turning your consequences into my responsibilities." Her lip trembled. "I wanted a family. And I wanted a partner," I said. "We both made wishes. Only one of us stole the coins." She stared at me with an anger that felt like grief wearing armor. "So that's it. You're going to watch me suffer." "I'm going to watch you grow," I said. "Suffering is the part you can't skip." She laughed once, small and bitter. "You're different." "I'm honest," I said, "which probably feels different." We stood in that fluorescent stalemate while the room breathed around us. Plates clanking, ropes slapping, fans humming their industrial lullaby. She finally said, "I can't go to another gym. This one's close to my doctor." "I'm not banning you from fitness," I said. "I'm asking you to respect my peace." "So you'll ignore me?" she said. "I will outwork the urge to respond," I said. "It's a muscle. I'm training it." Something in her posture sagged, the fight draining like air from a tire. "Do you ever think about the baby?" she asked, quiet, almost childlike. "Every time I choose mercy over revenge," I said. "I don't drag your name online. I don't tell my mother the worst stories. I don't send those screenshots to your aunt. That's me thinking about the baby, keeping the world a fraction softer than I want to." She looked startled at that, like she hadn't considered restraint as a gift. "Then help me," she said, one last Hail Mary. "Please." "I am helping," I said. "I'm telling you the truth to your face." She wiped her cheeks, annoyed with her own tears. "You sound like a therapist." "Can't afford one," I said. "Spent my refund on dumbbells." That almost made her smile, and for a second the past wobbled into focus. Movie nights, chilly Sundays, the way she used to tuck her feet under my thigh when she was cold. I let the image come and go like a stretch I wasn't keeping. Okay, she said finally, voice scraped thin. I get it. You won't help. I won't rescue, I said. Different verb. She nodded, a stiff little motion of surrender, and turned toward the treadmills like a soldier dismissed. Halfway there, she pivoted back. One more thing, she said. Why are you so calm? Because I rehearsed this scene in my head 100 times, I said. And in every version, I picked me. She held my gaze, then gave the barest nod and walked away. I watched her step onto a treadmill, press buttons with the jittery decisiveness of someone trying to outrun a feeling, and I went back to the rack. The bar felt heavier, of course it did. Clarity always weighs more than hope. I chalked my hands, ducked under, lifted, and thought about form. On the fourth set, Pete drifted close again. You good, man? He asked softly. I'm better than I used to be, I said. Which is the whole point of this place, right? He grinned. Progress over ego, he said, patting the rack. Let me know if you need a spot. Between sets, I watched the room the way you do when your heart has calmed down enough to see other people again. A woman deadlifting her body weight like she'd made an appointment with gravity and refused to be late. An older guy on the rower, keeping time with quiet dignity. Two teens laughing too loud and learning what their bones were built for. Life, stubborn and sweaty, going on. I moved to pull-ups, then farmer's carries, letting the work rinse whatever residue the conversation left behind. By the time I hit the sled, breath coming in organized fires, I felt like a person with edges again. Lily had shifted to a slow incline walk, eyes on some far point only she could see. Good. Let her stare at the horizon. Everybody needs one. That was enough. 3 months after the gym showdown of the century, life had finally gone quiet enough that I could hear my own thoughts again, and they sounded suspiciously like smooth jazz. No surprise visits, no handwritten manifestos, no late-night voicemails demanding closure. Just me, my coffee, and an ever-expanding playlist called Songs for People Who Dodged a Bullet. Things were good. So, naturally, that's when karma decided to drop by wearing heels and holding receipts. It started with a text from Mason. Bro, you sitting down? I replied, it's 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Define sitting. He sent a screenshot of a social media post from a coworker at Lily's old company. Apparently, Jamie's wife kicked him out, and HR is launching an investigation. Below it, a blurry picture of Jamie hauling cardboard boxes to a Camry that looked as tired as his soul. Caption, corporate scandal hits our office again, #leadership goals. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. Almost. See, karma doesn't send you an email first. It just quietly sits in the corner, waiting for the right dramatic lighting. And when it shows up deluxe edition. Jamie's wife had apparently gone full detective mode, found out about the affair and the company funds he used for business dinners, and decided her next move was divorce plus public humiliation. According to Mason, she'd even changed the locks and spray-painted Team Wife on the garage door. Subtle? No. Satisfying? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Lily's world was collapsing faster than a cheap lawn chair. She'd lost the apartment Jamie had been paying for, the Audi got repossessed, because of course it did, and she moved back in with her parents. Remember Elaine and Martin, the self-appointed moral police? Yeah. Apparently they weren't thrilled about their daughter turning their guest room into a maternity ward/pity party. She'd posted a new profile picture anyway, her hand on her baby bump, captioned, "Strong women rise from ashes." Except the ashes were unpaid bills. By lunchtime, I was neck-deep in the group chat with Mason and Ryan, giving play-by-play commentary like it was the Super Bowl of regret. Mason, dude, she sold the Audi sound system on Marketplace for $150. Ryan, she's posting cryptic quotes like, people change when you stop funding their Netflix. Me, poetic, tragic, budget-friendly. Of course, I told myself I was above it all, that I didn't care, but come on. If Karma were a TV show, you'd watch every episode. I made popcorn. Around 6 p.m. that night, Mason called, voice still shaking with secondhand amusement. Bro, Jamie just posted on LinkedIn. He wrote an entire article about resilience through adversity. I spit my drink. You mean he cheated, lost his job, and turned it into a motivational post? Mason read it out loud. Sometimes life challenges you to grow beyond your comfort zone. I'm grateful for the lessons pain teaches. I groaned. So he's basically rebranding as the Dalai Lama of bad decisions. Mason snorted. His wife commented, "Glad you're learning something." 10,000 likes. That night, I sat on my balcony with a beer, watching the city lights blink like the universe was in on the joke. It hit me that I didn't even feel vengeful anymore, just weirdly grateful. You spend months thinking you'll never get justice, and then one day you realize justice has a great sense of timing. 2 weeks later, I ran into Zoe, Lily's sister, at a coffee shop. I was mid-order when I heard the icy voice behind me. Wow, guess karma has favorites. I turned, smiled. Zoe, hey, still doing that Defend the Indefensible tour? She rolled her eyes. You're so smug. Not smug, I said. Just well-rested. She snapped. She's been through hell. She doesn't deserve this. I took my coffee from the barista, leaned on the counter, and said, deserve is a big word. Maybe save it for people who don't steal company cars for team-building activities. Zoe scoffed. You think you're better than her. No, I said. I just think I'm better off. Then I smiled politely and walked out, leaving her to argue with the foam on her latte. But apparently, the universe had decided I'd had enough peace and quiet for one evening, because as I was browsing flight options, my phone started blowing up with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, and then I saw that Melissa had posted something new on social media, and from the preview notification alone, I could tell this was going to be a special kind of dramatic. I clicked on it, and there it was, the black dress photo shoot, posted at 11 p.m. on what was supposed to have been the night before our wedding. The social media post was exactly the kind of performative grief I'd come to expect from Melissa at this point. A carefully staged photo of her in a little black dress, sitting on her bed with perfectly arranged mood lighting that suggested she'd spent at least an hour getting the shot just right. The caption was a novel-length meditation on lost love and broken dreams, complete with poetry quotes and hashtags about healing and moving forward. It was the digital equivalent of those Victorian mourning portraits, except instead of mourning a dead spouse, she was mourning a wedding she'd torpedoed herself. I scrolled through the comments, which were predictably full of supportive friends telling her how strong she was and how she deserved better, and I was about to close the app and go back to looking at Iceland flights when my doorbell rang. At 11 p.m., on a Thursday night, I looked at my phone, looked at the door, and felt this sense of weary resignation wash over me, because I knew exactly who was standing on the other side of that door, and I knew this was going to be exhausting. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole to confirm my suspicions, and there she was, Melissa, wearing that same little black dress from the photo shoot, which meant she'd taken the pictures, posted them online, and then immediately driven to my apartment for what I assumed was going to be one final dramatic gesture. I stood there for a moment debating whether to even open the door, because I was tired, emotionally drained from the conversation with Robert, and really not in the mood for whatever performance Melissa had planned. But I also knew she wasn't going to leave. She'd just keep ringing the doorbell or knocking or eventually call the cops claiming I'd stolen something from her apartment, so I might as well get this over with. I unlocked the door, opened it but kept the chain on, and looked at her through the 3-inch gap. It's 11 p.m., Melissa, I said flatly. What do you want? She looked up at me, and I could see she'd been crying again, her makeup artfully smudged in a way that looked almost intentional, like she'd carefully cultivated the look of a heartbroken woman from Maximum Impact. Tomorrow was supposed to be our day, she said softly, her voice taking on that breathy quality she used when she was trying to be vulnerable and appealing. I didn't respond, just stood there looking at her through the gap in the door, waiting for whatever speech she'd rehearsed on the drive over. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she continued, and I noticed she was swaying slightly, which suggested she'd maybe had a few drinks before deciding this late-night visit was a good idea. About us, about everything that happened, about what I want. She paused dramatically, clearly expecting me to ask what she wanted, but I remained silent, and the silence stretched between us like a rubber band pulled tight. Logan chose Ashley, she finally said, and there was genuine hurt in her voice now, the kind that wasn't performed or calculated but actually real. He told me we needed space, that our friendship was too complicated, that he couldn't handle being in the middle of all this drama anymore. And I realized something. She looked up at me with those big eyes that had probably gotten her out of trouble her entire life, and I could see her trying to gauge whether her words were landing. I realized that I lost you over someone who didn't even want me. I threw away 4 years with a good man because I was holding on to some fantasy about my ex-boyfriend, and now I don't have either of you. It was probably the most self-aware thing I'd heard her say in the entire time I'd known her, and if she'd come to this realization maybe a month ago, we might have had a different conversation. But standing there at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, a day before what would have been our wedding, listening to her confess that she'd torpedoed our relationship for a guy who'd now dumped her, I felt absolutely nothing. "I'm sorry," she said, and a tear rolled down her cheek in a way that looked cinematic, perfectly timed, and I wondered if she'd practiced this in the mirror before coming over. "I'm so sorry, Adrian. I made a mistake, a huge mistake, and I want to fix it. I want us to fix it. We can postpone the wedding, give ourselves time to work through this, go to couples therapy, whatever you need. Just please, please don't give up on us." She reached through the gap in the door like she was going to touch my hand, and I took a step back automatically. "Melissa," I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose Logan over me, over our relationship, over our future together. The only reason you're here now is because Logan rejected you, and you're looking for a backup plan." Her face crumpled, and I could see her trying to formulate an argument, some way to spin what I'd just said into something that made her look less calculating. "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I'm here because I love you, because I realized what I lost." "No," I interrupted, and I felt something shift in my chest, something final and definitive. "You're here because you lost Logan and you're scared of being alone. If Logan had welcomed you with open arms, if he'd offered to help you pay that $5,000 you owe me, if he'd validated your feelings and told you I was the bad guy, you wouldn't be standing here right now. You'd be with him, continuing whatever emotional affair you've been having for months." I watched her face cycle through shock, denial, and then anger as she realized I knew more than she'd thought I knew. "Ashley told you," she said accusingly, and I almost laughed at how quickly she'd jumped to that conclusion. "Ashley sent me the screenshots," I confirmed, "of your texts with Logan. All of them. The ones where you talked about missing him, wondering what your life would have been like if he hadn't cheated, needing him at the wedding for closure. All of it, Melissa. I've seen all of it." The color drained from her face, and I watched her try to figure out how to salvage this situation now that she knew I had evidence of what had really been going on. "Those texts were taken out of context," she started, but her heart wasn't in it, and we both knew it was a weak defense. "Adrian, please, just let me explain," but I was done. Done with the drama, done with the manipulation, done with the emotional chess games and the ultimatums and the constant feeling that I was competing with a ghost from her past. "There's nothing to explain," I said, and I started to close the door. "You loved Logan more than you loved me. Or at least you loved the idea of Logan more than you loved our actual relationship. And that's fine, Melissa. You're allowed to have those feelings. But you're not allowed to expect me to just accept them and marry you anyway." She started crying in earnest now, the kind of ugly crying that wasn't performed or staged, and she grabbed the doorframe like she could physically prevent me from closing the door. "Please don't do this," she begged, and there was real desperation in her voice. "Please, Adrian. I can change. I'll cut Logan out completely. I'll never talk to him again. Just please give me another chance." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt this overwhelming sense of sadness mixed with relief. Sadness for what we'd had and lost, for the future we'd planned that would never happen, for the woman I'd thought she was who turned out to be someone completely different. But also relief that I was seeing this now, before the wedding, before we'd legally bound ourselves together, before I'd spent years of my life trying to compete with a man she couldn't let go of. "I'm not giving you another chance, Melissa," I said quietly. "Not because I don't think people can change, but because I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if you're really over Logan or if you're just better at hiding your feelings for him." She opened her mouth to argue, to plead, to try one more angle, but I continued before she could speak. "You gave me an ultimatum about Logan being in our wedding. I called your bluff and canceled everything. Now you're here because Logan doesn't want you and you've realized that maybe I wasn't such a bad option after all. But I'm not a backup plan, Melissa. I'm not a consolation prize for when your first choice doesn't work out. I'm someone who deserves to be someone's actual first choice, not their safe option when the exciting choice falls through." I could see understanding dawning on her face, the realization that this really was over, that there was no combination of words or tears or late-night visits that was going to change my mind. Tomorrow was supposed to be our wedding day, she said softly, one last attempt to appeal to nostalgia or sentimentality or whatever emotion she thought might crack my resolve. Yeah, it was, I agreed. But you canceled it when you decided Logan was more important than I was. I just made it official. I gently but firmly pushed her hand off the doorframe, and she let go without resistance, like all the fight had suddenly drained out of her. "Good night, Melissa," I said, and I meant it with a finality that made it clear this was goodbye, not just for tonight, but forever. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there listening to her cry on the other side for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 30 seconds. Then I heard her footsteps, slow and heavy, walking away from my door and presumably back to her car. I walked to my window and looked out into the parking lot, watching her sit in her car with her head on the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking with sobs, and I felt that same mix of sadness and relief wash over me again. I stood there watching her for about 20 minutes, half concerned she might do something stupid and half just making sure she actually left, and eventually, she started her car and drove away, her taillights disappearing into the night. I went back to my couch, picked up my phone, and looked at the Iceland flight prices again, and this time I didn't just browse, I actually booked one. I selected a date 2 weeks out, picked a hotel that advertised Northern Lights tours, and entered my credit card information with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. The confirmation email arrived in my inbox, and I stared at it for a moment. This tangible proof that I was moving forward, that I was choosing myself and my own happiness over the toxic dynamic I'd been stuck in. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother. "Just saw Melissa's Instagram post. You okay?" I typed back, "Better than I've been in a long time, actually. Also, I'm going to Iceland." He sent back a string of celebration emojis and a message saying he was proud of me, which was unexpectedly touching and made me realize how lucky I was to have family who actually supported healthy boundaries. I turned off my phone, took a long shower, and climbed into bed feeling lighter than I had in months. Tomorrow would have been my wedding day, the culmination of months of planning and thousands of dollars and countless hours of stress about seating charts and centerpieces and whether the chicken or the fish was the better entree option. Instead, I'd be going to work, living my normal life, and looking forward to a trip to Iceland that I was taking just for me, funded by the money Robert had given me as an apology for his daughter's behavior. As I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was that sometimes the best decision you can make is the one that costs you something in the short term, but saves you everything in the long term. I'd lost a fiancé, sure, but I'd gained my self-respect, my freedom, and the knowledge that I wasn't willing to settle for a relationship where I had to compete with someone's ex for their attention and affection. That seemed like a pretty good trade to me, all things considered. The next day, what would have been my wedding day, I woke up at 7 a.m. feeling weirdly peaceful. No stress about whether the flowers would arrive on time. No anxiety about whether Uncle Frank would get drunk and hit on the bridesmaids. No last-minute panic about my vows, or whether I'd remember to put on deodorant before the ceremony. Just a regular Saturday morning with absolutely nothing planned except existing as a free man. I made coffee, scrolled through my phone while deliberately avoiding social media, because I was not about to check if Melissa had posted some melodramatic message about what should have been happening today, and then my brother texted me. "Fishing trip. You, me, the lake. Be ready in an hour." I didn't argue, just pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed my baseball cap, and waited for him to pick me up. We spent the entire day at the lake, sitting in his beat-up fishing boat drinking beer and catching absolutely nothing, which was perfect because the fishing was never really the point anyway. My brother didn't bring up Melissa once, didn't ask if I was okay, or if I wanted to talk about my feelings, or any of that emotional processing stuff. He just handed me beers, made stupid jokes about the fish being too smart to fall for our clearly inferior bait, and let the silence be comfortable instead of awkward. It was exactly what I needed, just hours of peace and normalcy, and remembering that life existed outside of wedding drama and relationship implosions. By the time we packed up and headed back, I felt more relaxed than I had in months, maybe even years if I was being honest with myself. That evening, my friends threw me what they called a freedom party, which was really just a barbecue in my buddy Mike's backyard. but they'd gone all out with decorations that said things like, "Congratulations on your divorce," which was technically inaccurate since I'd never actually gotten married, but the sentiment was appreciated. We played paintball in Mike's neighbor's field, which was probably illegal, but nobody called the cops, so we counted it as a win, and everyone made jokes about how at least I didn't have to learn Logan's middle name for a best man speech, which was honestly one of the better silver linings anyone had pointed out. My friend Sarah, who'd never liked Melissa and had been very vocal about it, gave a toast that was mostly just her listing all the red flags she'd noticed over the years that I'd apparently been too blind to see. And while it was kind of brutal, it was also kind of validating to know that other people had seen the problems I'd been making excuses for. Meanwhile, according to the group chat that I'd been added to by Melissa's former roommate, who apparently had switched sides in this breakup, Melissa had spent the day that should have been her wedding crying in her childhood bedroom, while Linda raged on Facebook about men who can't handle strong women. The post had apparently gotten pretty heated, with several of Linda's friends pointing out that maybe Melissa bore some responsibility for the situation, which had caused Linda to double down and start blocking people left and right. Robert, bless his heart, had apparently stayed completely silent through the whole thing, neither defending nor condemning anyone, which I respected immensely. I blocked Linda's profile without reading whatever manifesto she'd posted, because I'd reached my lifetime limit of being called controlling and insecure, and I spent the rest of the evening eating ribs and playing cornhole and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in what felt like forever. Later that night, after I'd gotten home and showered off the paint and barbecue smoke, I did something impulsive. I sold the engagement ring. I'd been holding on to it, not sure what to do with it. But sitting there looking at the Iceland confirmation email, I realized I didn't want that ring in my apartment anymore. Didn't want the reminder of what it represented. Didn't want to look at it and think about Melissa and ultimatums and emotional affairs with ex-boyfriends. So I found a reputable jeweler who bought used engagement rings, made an appointment for Monday, and decided that whatever money I got for it was going straight into my Iceland fund, because if I was going to move forward with my life, I might as well do it in style under the Northern Lights. 2 weeks later, I was standing in Iceland watching the Northern Lights dance across the sky in colors that looked photoshopped but were somehow real, and I felt more at peace than I had in years. The ring had sold for a decent amount, enough to upgrade my hotel and book a glacier tour, and standing there in the freezing cold watching nature put on a light show that made every wedding decoration I'd ever stressed about look pathetic in comparison, I realized I'd made the right choice. I took one photo, just one, and posted it to Instagram with no caption because the image spoke for itself. Within minutes, I saw that Melissa had viewed my story, and I felt absolutely nothing about it, which was probably the best indication that I was actually moving on. People back home kept asking if I regretted canceling the wedding, if I should have just let Logan be in the wedding party, if maybe I'd overreacted. And every time someone asked, I gave them the same answer: absolutely not. If I'd given in to Melissa's ultimatum, Logan would have been at every barbecue, every Christmas, every family gathering for the rest of my life. He probably would have shown up on our honeymoon with sunscreen and emotional support, invited himself to our anniversary dinners, been the first person Melissa called whenever we had an argument. I would have spent my entire marriage competing with a ghost, always wondering if I measured up to whatever idealized version of Logan existed in Melissa's head. I lost $5,500. But I gained something infinitely more valuable: my self-respect, my peace of mind, and the knowledge that I wasn't willing to settle for a relationship where I came in second place to someone's ex-boyfriend. Standing under the Northern Lights, breathing in the cold Icelandic air, I realized that sometimes the best decision you can make is the one that costs you something in the short term, but saves you everything in the long term. When someone gives you an ultimatum, they think you'll fold. They think you'll choose them over your own boundaries because the alternative is too scary or too expensive or too lonely. But sometimes the best move is to call their bluff, walk away, and book a ticket to Iceland instead. Cheap price for dodging a lifetime of Logan cameos.